Welcome to Covering Our Bases. It's Friday, July 12th, ladies and gentlemen, and from Mets to Mariners, we break down baseball's biggest highlights and headlines with unique context from every MLB team's perspective. As we cover our bases, we aim to educate, entertain, and engage the average baseball fan who doesn't have the time to follow the other 29 teams around the league. Expect the fun storylines, patterns, predictions, and pageantry of Major League Baseball to be present at all times. He's NL Dan Harrow. I'm AL Warren Sprague. And Dan, of course, I've got to talk about this. The Home Run Derby dais is set. We know all of the 8 players who will be slugging it out for the Home Run Derby crown this year. And I'm mad. Okay, I'm going to get it out of the way. I'm mad. This is a really strange group composed here for the Home Run Derby, and I want to talk about who's missing, and there's a lot of sluggers that do seem to be missing. Your star first baseman for the New York Mets, Pete Alonso, of course, announced to try to go for his third
Yeah,
batting
Warren Alonso's in it.
championship here.
What's the problem? I
Yeah.
don't understand.
Gosh darn it, Dan. I want respect for guys like Cal Raleigh,
Oh,
but beyond, of course I want my Mariner in, but dude, Christian Walker's one of the sluggers not there. Aaron Judge, of course. Juan Soto. Shohei Ohtani,
what?
absent stars. It's like they didn't want to put on a show this year, is what
Hmm.
I feel. And there's guys like Adolis Garcia, who's got the same homers as Cal, and has been just about as unhot, at least on the lines, slashes. And then we've got Alec Boehm, who's only hit 11 for the entire season so far.
That's
I
true.
love what Alec I love what he's done in Philadelphia, Dan, but I'm mad. Please tell me you're a little mad with me. Who's missing and who do you wish was there?
You bring up a great point, man. Like all of these guys, but the most jarring to me is Judge and Otani. Like Otani for the obvious reasons. I mean, he's been right there the entire year at the front of the race for home runs. But Judge had a
Mm-hmm.
slower start to the year, Warren, and kind of ramped it up, kicked it into gear, and he's now leading the league in home runs and slugging percent. In fact, both of those guys are 1-2 in those categories, which is to me like, how do you not put them into it. Now, like there is the talk that Otani probably wouldn't have done the home run derby if he had been named to it, just because he's still in rehab, focusing on pitching, and doesn't necessarily need that extra strain. So there's that side of it. The Aaron Judge thing, I think, makes him the biggest snub for me, Warren. Like you named some really good
Mm.
names in there, but that one is so obvious. I mean, I don't understand how he's not in it. I like that Garcia and Henderson are in it. I like that they named Hernandez to the team. I heard,
Sure.
Warren, that they actually offered it to Vladdy since he's already made the team as a starter and he turned it down,
Oh,
which is probably why either Hernandez or one
right.
of those other guys were added in there. But like as much as I love Ozuna and he's been popping off this year, home runs is his thing. It's good to see him in there. I would have loved to see Aaron Judge a little bit more though, Warren.
Dude, with all due respect, Josh Naylor is a great story that could have been capitalized on here. You've got let's see, Bryce Harper, of course. I know he's injured. I'm just saying things out loud. Jordan Alvarez, keen slugger for the Astros. I mean, even he could have a presence here. It's just strange, and I don't like it. Some of these storylines really left out in the wind. And I have a follow up question, Dan. Why would any slugging star turn down the home run derby? Why not go out there and have some fun?
Yeah, because it's not fun for some guys, and I guess there's an injury concern for some others, especially if your season is more important to you. You know, the All Star break is the only break these guys get. 4 days off, it's not even that long. 4 days off in the middle of the season. And if you're an All Star, you're already playing one of those days. So maybe they just take the extra rest. I mean, they're changing the rules a little bit this year so that hopefully it's a little bit more competitive and guys aren't getting gassed, but we'll see how it goes.
Whatever. I feel like I'm being gaslit by the lack of presence from some of these stars. I'm miffed, but fine. Go ahead. Go with the absolute straight down the middle, completely predictable answer. Maybe these guys just want to be healthy for the rest of the season. Thanks, coach. I love it.
That's what I'm here
Boring.
for.
Hey, I'm just grateful Seattle had a better All Star weekend on the books than this Arlington one is shaping up to be. So I'll just leave it at that. Make it about Seattle one last time and get ready to jump into our anti rankings. And what a anti-ranking collection we are bound to offer you today. Lots of teams moving up and down the ladder, including some really scary trends for some of baseball's finest. So buckle up, friends, as we get ready to break down the 30 worst teams in baseball. But before we do, I don't know if you guys knew more to recording, but I knew I was ready to record today because I had a social media post talk about it. And I want to throw it out there that we have a new accomplice in the fold. We want to say thank you to Maya, an old friend of mine, a contact from the anime world out here in Vegas, who chose to try to help us get us out there. You know, Dan and I love doing this, but we're not so good at saying, hey, you there, watch us because we're better than everybody else. Well, now we've got somebody trying to do that for us. So everybody give a good hello and a like and a love to Maya. She's actually going to be paying attention to our social media for us on TikTok and Instagram. So take a look out for that. And as we jump into our 30 team anti rankings, Dan, you get to go first again 3 weeks in a row. It's not a fluke. The Mets, your Mets, had the better record than the Mariners, my Mariners. Darn it. But I'm excited to see where you shoot first here with the 30th worst team in the league, because there's a glaring candidate in my mind that I'm begging for you to go ahead and pluck from that low-hanging tree. Let's do it, dude. First anti-ranking team. Who's number 30, Dan?
There's a lot of deserving teams down here, Warren, and it's still weird for me to be picking first. I'm curious if by the end of the year I'll have picked first as many times as you have. Maybe we'll even out a little bit more. But at this point, it's a tough call. I'm gonna have to pick on some local teams for my division, though. It's gonna be the Miami Marlins in the 30th spot.
Oh, okay. You would go. You
Yeah,
played it safe. I counted on you.
I could have gone a little more extreme, but you can't. I cannot pass up a chance to kick dirt on a division rival, Warren. I'll just never pass up at the chance. So the Marlins went 2-7 this week, and I think it was a chance for them to win some of these games, Warren. They started off with a 3-game series versus Boston. They were swept at the hands of the Red Sox, who have been hot recently. And then they won a 3-game series against the White Sox. Took 2 out of 3. That's pretty acceptable. Can't be too surprised by that. That's 2 home wins, too. Couple burgers, Warren. Can't forget that.
Yay!
And
Yum,
then
yum, yum. The number's 18, I think. 18 on the burger.
yes, 18 on the burger count. And remember, they added on those crowns. So even if you can't get a burger, you can get a crown. The team might not be kings, but you could feel like a king.
Hey, Maya. Maya, if you pay attention to this week's episode like I expect you to, I want a crown. Figure that out right now, please.
That's a test there.
That is assignment number 1. All in good fun. All in good fun. Yeah, of course Miami deserves to be the basement dweller, and they're throwing up the proverbial white flag, ready to resoundingly remove maybe Tanner Scott and Jazz Chisholm Jr. from this team are what the rumors are saying. And Dan, I'm salivating at the idea of a second base and outfield superstar coming to Seattle. I would love that beyond no measure. Like, I would love some Jazz Chisholm in my life. What about you? Do any of these players swirl like they could be Mets here in the next couple of weeks?
Man, Tanner Scott would be a great addition to our bullpen. We've already added a little bit. He's for sure going to go somewhere, so I'd love to see that. You said it, Jazz seems like the most likely name, like maybe Josh Bell, but almost certainly Jazz. And wherever he goes, he's going to be a big impact. I wonder, Warren, if that'll be a situation where you see the outfielders in like Chicago in Luis Robert Jr. get moved first, and maybe that sets a market price for Jazz. Maybe a secondary team sweeps in like Seattle because a big team like the Dodgers or Phillies swept in for the other one. So definitely see some names moving off of this team soon. The Miami's going to get worse, Warren. I hate to say it, but they're going to get worse next time we talk about them.
Yes, and it's too bad. May they keep excuse me, everybody. May they keep enough of their long-term pieces intact to be able to be something after 2024. But it's true. It seems like certain names need to fly off this team in order to set up that future. And boy, I hope Seattle's calling about Jazz, because good vibe only are gone, and he would be a great replacement for that. And I will try not to make every single one of these about Seattle, but that's my hottest trade chip that I want for the
Cue every team,
Yeah.
Warren, saying, "I'd love this guy on the team."
Yeah, I should be thinking on that level, should I not? I mean, I know you
Absolutely.
should too.
Yes.
Absolutely. So Tanner Scott, a great pick to potentially come over to the Mets from the Marlins. Will it happen? We don't know, but we do know that we're going to kick off the 29th team on the list in my first pick of the week, and I'm going to do what you didn't have the chutzpah to do, Dan.
Hmm.
Let's talk about the New York Yankees.
Ah,
What on earth is happening? Okay, this went from being a lock, an absolute pleasure of a team to watch, to being an anomaly of mediocrity or worse, Dan. I mean, this week they went 2-7, and it wasn't even against teams that really should have challenged them on this level. They got swept by Cincinnati, who also, by the way, got swept this week, but we'll talk about them a little bit later. So it's not like they're a dominant force, is what I'm saying. They give up 2 of 3 to the Boston Red Sox at home, and then they get 2 of 3 taken from them by the Rays, who are suddenly deciding to remind. I guess suddenly is the wrong word. They're like professionally treading water in the middle, are those Rays, but staying close enough to these Yankees to knock them off. And when I'm watching these highlights play back, I mean, they've got all the offensive pieces they've had all year. They're just sputtering in a way that we didn't expect at this moment. And the injuries to guys like Rizzo and Torres seem to be making more of an impact than we expected. How much is Ron in New York? And Dan, there's a pattern here. What do they do to fix it? Because it looks like they have to, man. They can't just ignore this. What do you think about the Yanks in the 29th spot?
there's definitely a pattern. It's shocking, first of all, to see them down this low, and it's hard to just blame the offense because you mentioned a couple injuries and Glaber's gone on and off. DJ's been in and out of the lineup. Rizzo's been gone for a while, but Rizzo's replacement in Ben Rice has been excellent to the point where
Yeah,
like he might keep the job even when Rizzo comes back healthy.
yeah.
And Judge and Soto have been in the lineup, so it hasn't really been the offense. It's worth noting, Warren, that since June 13th, Garrett Cole returned to the lineup. He returned to this team that was leading the American League in ERA for a long time. Since then,
Mm-hmm.
June 13th, starting pitchers of the Yankees have collectively a 6.44 ERA, the
Oh,
worst in baseball by more than a run. Warren,
oh.
collectively, and only Nestor Cortez has had an ERA under 6. It's actually been under 4, but he's been 1-4 in his starts. So when Nestor does come up, they can't get it done. It's been kind of a perfect storm. I think it's important to remember the Yankees haven't had a really bad stretch. They're performing really well at the start of the year. This is
Mm-hmm.
a bad stretch for about 2 weeks now that we've seen. I'm not
Yeah,
going to freak out too much. I think that they will be aggressive at the deadline and add a little bit. These were some ugly divisional series losses for sure, but
yeah.
I still think after they could use the All Star game to come out of this. Not panicking on the Yankees yet, but man, they're throwing away like a good chance at taking a lead in their division, which now they're falling further and further behind Baltimore.
Yeah, absolutely. Still a lock in the playoff race, of course, for now, but you see New York faithful starting to sweat with teams like the Red Sox and the Royals and Houston. And of course, Seattle would be in the mix if they fall out of the division lead. Like, there's a tough bank of teams vying for American League contendership, so you don't want to slump too much while you have the opportunity to pad your stats. So, bummer for New York right now to be where they're at in a major way. And for those of us who were hoping for a collapse like this from the Yankees to make the playoff race more interesting, grab your bloody popcorn, okay? Because we need to see where this will go next. And I know I'm excited to see if Darth Vader dies a little early into this movie. I just don't expect it, but yeah, I mean, to have them on the ropes on this level, 2 weeks in a row, I think, right? They were
Yeah,
they were low hanging fruit last week too.
it got worse.
Figure it, gotta figure it out, friends. So Dan, take us into Team 28. We don't want to get too hung up on how nauseating that scenario is for the Yanks.
Yeah, man. Hey, this is fun having these teams down here. I like it. Let's keep it going. Let's have the Washington Nationals. Let me kick some more
Okay.
dirt on the NL East, Warren. So the Washington Nationals had a 3-8 week. They had a lot of
Yup.
games. 2 of their 3 series this week, 7 of their total games were against the Mets. The first one was a 4 game set. They split it 2-2. Then they had a 4 game set against St. Louis. They went 1-3, and then they were swept in a 3 game series against the Mets. So
Yeah.
talked a lot about the Nationals in the past. A few things that have changed, Warren. A couple weeks ago, they made a decision right before the lead up to the deadline to just kind of cut ties with some veterans that they tried out at the start of the year. It just hasn't been working. We saw Nick
Hmm.
Senzel, Joey Meneses, a lot of guys cut option to the minors if they would take it, kind of just shred a lot of pieces. And that allowed them to promote a lot of their younger prospects, be a little bit more aggressive towards this
Yeah.
rebuild that they're working through. We have the draft coming up this week. They got a couple high picks, so it seems like their attention has very much shifted. They are taking a couple of trade offers, but they have a lot of team control over some of their prospects. So it doesn't seem like they're going to be moving a lot of people out. Maybe a few performing bats. Like I heard some offers for guys like CJ Abrams. I can't see them realistically moving on from anybody like that. It might be more just pitching side of things, like a Mackenzie Gore. So
Mhm.
I think Washington will be sellers in the next few weeks post All Star game. Uh,
Yeah.
it's going to make them worse. We saw, and that was what I was leading into, was I saw their performance on the field against the Mets. It was a worse defensive and offensive team since they made these moves. They're giving time to prospects, understood, but their
Yeah.
performance on the field is suffering, and that might continue to get worse.
Yeah, I think we saw it this week with the results. Like this literally feels like Washington going ahead and going, you know what, New York, with that split, we were nice and competitive. Thank you. Oh, hello, St. Louis, with that shellacking. We've been put in our place one more time, and now, oh, hello, New York. Thank you for sweeping us. Now that tells us we are ready at long last to wave the white flag on this season. And hey, I raise a toast to those Nationals because they were fun to talk about through the first half of the season. They really put up a fight in situations we didn't expect, and there were some really compelling series wins, including one against my Mariners, that told us that maybe this team was going to be A-OK and surprise some folks and sneak into the playoff race. So honestly, even though they may get worse, I think they're choosing to intelligently and playing with some house cards into next season. Look for this team to be maybe a playoff contender for that National League wild card if they can stack a couple chips here. This isn't a loss overall. It is a loss for 2024, but I think their long-term picture in Washington is exciting and they know that and they're ready to start shoring up some assets and get ready for what could be a more compelling run in the next couple of years.
Yeah,
So,
they got a great
uh,
core, Warren. They got a great core. They really do.
I believe you, and I'm not just blowing smoke when I say I think there are brighter days ahead for the Washington Nationals, and I had some good fun covering how they were plucky and compelling players so far this year. So if they take that step back, it's fair. They're not necessarily a team that I expect to come out of this incredibly stacked National League wildcard race. I think nobody did have them in that talk until they started playing decently well at this stage of the year. So, again, kudos to them. Let them go in peace. I have nothing nasty to say about those Nats because they're outside my division. Dan, allow me to make it a little bit more about me as
Please.
we target my division next. Let's snag some low-hanging fruit from the AL West in the form of the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim.
Yes.
Uh, boy. This team, I'm not here to pan them too much because they've been panning themselves, but this is a team that, sometimes puts together compelling baseball behind the resurging Kevin Pillar, who just announced this is likely his swan song in Major League
Yeah.
Baseball anyway.
10 years.
It's too bad because he's having such a great year. If he finishes off this year with the Angels doing what he's done, I mean, bring him on for one more year. Why not? I
Hmm.
mean, you're playing at a decent level and you're getting your face put up on the billboard in front of the stadium, which I don't know if you ever got that, the Rogers Center in Toronto. So why not live it up a little bit? I mean, it's not like the Angels are a terrible place to play. I mean, LA at least. I mean, the culture's not great. We talk about that all the time. But Kevin Pillar was one of the best parts of what's been going on in Anaheim. But this week that didn't amount to much. They went 2 for 7 or 2 and 7 as well this week, just as bad as the Yanks. They got swept by the Oakland Athletics. They lost 2 of 3 to the Cubs. Yes, the Cubs. We'll talk about them later today because they had a good week for a change, which they needed. And then 2 of 3 were given up to the Texas Rangers in division. You don't want that. Those champs can't get back on their feet at your expense. But you have to expect it at this point because this Angels team has been basically sewn together, cobbled together, and thrown out there to do their absolute best day in and day out. And there are some amazing guys emerging, of course. I've been a Moniak fan. I talk all the time about Zach Neto. I talk all the time about Luis Rengifo. Logan O'Hoppe might be the biggest name we haven't nearly harped on enough that's been getting plenty of well-deserved attention over in Los Angeles for what he's been able to do. He's an emerging young star. Kudos to young catcher Logan O'Hoppe. Do like watching him swing the bat. Rendon's back on this team. It absolutely does not matter. He is trash. So, again, this is the team that's been spinning its wheels like a firework on the pavement trying to decide when its sparks run out. So, there's not a whole lot here in competitive thoughts, and it screams that way in the way that the Seattle Los Angeles series got off to last night, but we'll talk about that next week. This is not an Angels team that has enough momentum to have too much more room in our discussion. Dan, what do you want to say about them before we move on?
Uh, I just want to say that I'm sure you know this, Warren, that every time I watch them, it's like they have half a team, They have half a team that's really, really good. You said a bunch of the young names on this team, Ohapi, Nito, like Moniak, Shanuel, all of these guys, they have half a team. It's just the other half that falls so short. Like Rendon gets healthy, and then Rengifo exits with I think he's nursing a wrist injury right now. So it's just one thing or another. Even if Trout comes back at some point this year, it's frustrating. I hope that they're not. I hope they don't have a deadline like they had last year where they were oddly aggressive. There's no need for that, but I also hope they don't sell off everybody. It'll be interesting to say. But Warren, just with that in mind, like let's assume that they're not going to sell off. That it'll be hopefully a little bit more prospect heavy team next year. We see a lot of the pieces coming together and hopefully forming that core, right? That could sustain this team in the future. Do you see any all-star snubs on this roster? Because Tyler Anderson is a deserving all-star, but he's the only one from the Angels. So could you name one player, maybe a position player from this team that probably should have gotten an all-star playing like they have so far this first half?
The guy who reads on paper like the best of the best of the best has got to be either Rengifo or Neto. Those two guys have been the most compelling in my mind. Though dudes like Calhoun and Guillorme and Pilar and, the vets that came in and were like, guess what? We still have something in the tank to give here, have a lot to be spoken for. Like, they've been the spark plugs that made this intriguing over the last couple of weeks. But in my heart, the core of this team is built around Neto, or of course O'Hoppe comes to mind. He's been slugging great. Like
Right.
he's in the conversation for some of those home run leaders in the American League. So some snubs, maybe not when you look at the prestige around him. When you look at the other names left off the ballot, there's just some more established names. But there's definitely quality in this team. And we're not just saying it for fun. There's just not consistent quality. So if they can iron out that consistency, which I suppose is king for all teams,
Sure.
I'm not saying anything controversial here. Everybody wants consistency across all aspects of the game. But if they can friggin' put it together and prove that it's actually stable, this is not the worst team that they can have on the field. I like the potential. But Dan, what about you? Does anybody scream a snub? I guess I'll say O'Hoppe, Neto, or Rengifo if they
Yeah.
made the list.
Rengifo,
I
if
would
he
have
was
been okay with
healthy, for sure. I think
Yeah.
he would be deserving. And Ohoppe's kind of had a breakout year. So I'd like to see him. And hey, I'm with you on all that. Just if keep Artie Moreno out of any decision making for this team. Don't let him sign Anthony Rendon 2.0 or make any decisions, and they'll be fine.
Yeah, good. They will be fine. Of course, though, it's a big thing to ask that this ownership or this front office doesn't muck it up, tar it up, and make it bad all over again. So we know the culture in LA is doing its best to build a new foundation, and kudos to Ron Washington and the different ways he's tried it. It hasn't always looked pretty. It hasn't always sounded pretty, and he always hasn't said the things that I think a good general manager should say. But I think his heart's in the right place, and you're seeing it in the way the team is still doing its best to win games. Just don't do it anymore against my Mariners over the next 3 games, guys. Thank you so much.
Good luck.
Dan, On that subtle note of making it about my team at the end of the discussion, how about you take number 26 and run with it?
It's very subtle. Good job.
Thanks,
Yeah,
brother.
let's move it along, dude. Pretty bad team. Deserves to be down here. The Chicago White Sox did not win a
Huh?
series all week, Warren. They went 3 and
Yeah.
6. And not too surprised to see them down here. The resurging Tommy Pham isn't really helping. They went 1 and 2 in 3 series against Cleveland, against Miami, and then against Minnesota. So definitely some winnable games in there. Not a lot else to say about Chicago, Warren. We're just waiting. We're going to have a 20-minute segment on Chicago when they start trading everybody. But until then, we might as well bank our time because for now, it's just making sure Garrett Crochet doesn't get hurt, that Robert Jr. stays healthy. Does Tommy Pham want to go somewhere? I mean, I wish there was more to talk about, Warren. I wish I had more to say about this team. They're uninspiring offensively, and we're just waiting.
Dan, in perfect form, I think you've actually summarized it. And for a change, instead of adding more rambling to what you just said, I'm going to let Chicago lie right there in the road, as the roadkill they are,
Let them bleed
as
out.
we wait. Yeah, just bleed out, gang. Wait for animal services to come up and clean up after this mess. And in the form of all these trades, of all these pieces who will make other teams better. I don't really need anybody on this crew as much as you think I would, in true fashion, making a little bit more about me, just like you hinted I might. But if we got a Luis Robert Jr., I think that's a lot of buzz that's coming out of Seattle, is that we're looking at him pretty hard, and scouts are all over the place in Chicago at the moment from Seattle. So I'm hoping if we make a move, that whoever comes to the team doesn't strike out as much as they could.
You won't be
'Cause we don't.
disappointed in Tommy Pham as a cheaper option, for sure.
Exactly. And I think the Mariners are a smart enough organization that they could go for a Fam instead of a Robert and still feel like it's a win. So, yeah, we'll let, again, the roadkill lie. I don't need to kick it too much
Yeah.
more.
Cut to 2 weeks from now when they trade all their players to LA, Philadelphia, one to New York, and we're all like,
Got,
why?
We can't wait for it. Yeah, we're going to have such a good time in a couple of weeks when the trade deadline comes in, guys. And yeah, we'll take this moment to let you know our next recording is in exactly 2 weeks, the 26th, 4 days shy of the trade deadline. We will have the last series before the All-Star break for each team. So we'll talk about their momentum going into the Midsummer Classic. We'll highlight a couple of what the players might do in the Midsummer Classic. Dan and I aren't necessarily going to tell you what you already know about what happens during All-Star break because we only care about the momentum of the season itself, I would say.
Yeah.
We'll try to have some fun with it. But anyway, we'll have 2 more series following the All-Star game included for each team. So be ready for the fresh recording on Friday the 26th, if not Thursday evening, the night prior. Anyway, guys, blah, 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 blah. My next team, Dan, I'm mad at you because there are these great opportunities to do Dan picks. You know, those picks that make me go, oh, my chest, how are you doing this to us?
I'm
And you're
just
just
teeing
not
you up,
doing
dude.
it.
I'm teeing you up today.
And you've left a ball right on the tee for me
Meatball.
that is emblazoned in white and blue, and I simply must knock this sucker out of the park. Let's go. The 25th worst team in the league, the Los Angeles Dodgers, dude. What is happening to them too? They have no right to be this mediocre this deep into the season with the All-Star break looming. They went 3 and 6 this week. Sure, they're still 55 and 39 and top of their division and blah 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 blah
Sure.
blah, but if they're going to play bad, we're going to kick them. We need to take advantage of these golden opportunities. First, they dropped 2 of 3 to Arizona, who Dan has proclaimed is out in the playoff race. So friendly reminder that the exactly 500 Arizona Diamondbacks took 2 of 3 from the Dodgers, despite being out of the playoff race, Dan. I said it twice just to let it sink in. The Milwaukee Brewers gave up two for the Dodgers to feast on, so good for them. But then, in one of the most important series they could ask for at this stage of the season, they go up against the Philadelphia Phillies. They do it in Philadelphia, which would be the case if the playoffs started today. The road would march through Philadelphia, and you get swept. Okay? not what we want. We've talked about this, Dan, how it's important for the teams who have these other clubs as the benchmark, right? To knock them off when they have the chance. And LA didn't look good against Philly. What do they do at this stage? What does this mean? Is it real that they'll collapse when it counts, Dan? Because the evidence might suggest that to be the case. Give it to me.
They've had a lot of demons with health already this year, but things are getting worse more than they're getting better. And like you mentioned, they could lose every game next week and probably still lead their division. That's not the
Yep.
concern right now. It's about playoffs. A lot of their injuries, a lot of these guys will be back in time for the playoffs, but it just raises the question of how is the health of this team going to stand? Glass now finally got hurt. He did great whole first half of the year, Warren. He was reaching a point where he was on track to pitch as many innings as he's pitched in his career. And he got hurt.
Yep.
That's what happens, right? Obviously, losing Mookie
Yep.
was huge. Max Muncy was supposed to be a quick 2-week trip on the IL. That's been extended to a 60-day because he's dealing with more discomfort in his oblique. Like, the list goes on and on. You already know they have barely any rotation at this point. Bobby Miller was sent down to the minors to try and refine his stuff. It's frustrating, and this is coming during a swirl.
I just got to say how disappointed it is to know that Bobby Miller struggled so much as he did. He was such a cool story last year
Yeah.
that even I, not a Dodger guy, was like, cool, man. It's great to see a rookie bust into a rotation like that
Yeah.
and make a name for himself. So, yeah, his ERA ballooning to over 8 and requiring him to get fine-tuned in AAA, bit of a bummer for me, for sure. I like seeing pitchers who rise to stay high, but
Right.
keep going. The
They have
list goes
other
on.
young pitchers that they've kind of been forced in that position. The only starter currently healthy on the starting rotation is James Paxton. Everybody else has less than a year's service time. So, Philly, they got kind of exposed in that way. They just gave up too many runs, didn't score enough compared to what they were giving up, and that's kind of been the story these last few weeks. And as we get halfway through July, the Dodgers are really going to have to take this break to heal up and try and refine their stuff. Just like we were talking about with the Yankees, we haven't seen this team have many slumps this year. Every great team has a slump, at least one, most more than one throughout the year. Chalk this up to the first big slump from the Dodgers. Maybe they had a mini slump earlier this year, if I remember correctly. But, like, that's why these rankings are good, I feel like, Warren. I'm trying to remember the last time the Dodgers were, like, this low. And it was maybe once
Sure.
out of the last 14 weeks, right? So it's a good indicator of going forward of the strength of the team. But we also know how bad they can be if they don't stay healthy. So I don't expect them to be aggressive at the deadline. I've been saying since the start of the year, I think that Dodgers are thinking about next year. This is a learning year, an opportunity year, and maybe this is just a chance for to see half of their prospect pool in the starting lineup and see who will stay on the team for next year.
Yeah, I think you're right. Kicking the tires, seeing where everybody's at, and it's an enjoyable process, except for those Dodgers fans who are expecting this to be the year
Sure.
that they dominantly run away with the league, and we're not seeing it happen.
Not this
Honestly,
year.
we're not. Even more so that it's funny. It's just funny to know that even though they look on paper like the force to be reckoned with for decades to come, they may look human from game to game during the process. All about the playoffs. So you got to be ready to beat playoff contenders like the Phillies, and it just didn't happen. For the sake of consistency, Teoscar Hernandez strikeout count sits at 109 today. He's 8th in the league, Dan. But let me just pretty much retire this segment a tad because a Seattle Mariner has passed Teoscar. And no, it's not Julio or Polanco.
No.
It's my heart. It's my heartthrob, Cal Raleigh.
Oh, Warren. Is it
I know.
you?
Stop. Big Dumper. Big Dumper sits at 7th in the league with 111 strikeouts, 2 more than Teoscar. So you can imagine if both those dudes were in the Seattle lineup, we would still feel pretty much like a team where we're at right now, except that we might have scored more runs at this point.
More home runs.
You want to? I suppose, yeah. I suppose at this point we could finally say, I wish I kept Teoscar.
Oh,
Just get it
no.
out of the way. Yeah, I'd rather have had Teoscar on this roster than Mitch Haniger. Sentences I never thought I'd say when you compare the histories between these two teams. But hey, look at me! How did I make this about Seattle? I'm just so good at it. I'm so good at it.
Is that because
Thank
you want to talk about them next? Is that why?
Oh, Dan, is that who you want to put at number 24? Because
No,
I don't.
uh, I don't know, Warren. I don't know if I'm ready to torture you that bad yet.
I don't think we deserve it, to be fair. So I do hope you've got somebody else queued up, but you're on deck, buddy, and take a swing at number 24 for us.
Yeah, man. We're gonna keep beating up on a couple of the guests we had earlier this year. You just said the Dodgers. I'm gonna say the San Diego Padres.
Boo.
Also bringing it
Padres.
up the back. Yeah, rough week for
Yeah.
the Padres. Didn't play as many games. They went 3-5 this week. Kind of a mixed bag. Got a series win against Texas. Took 2 out of 3, and lost a series to the Diamondbacks. Those same Diamondbacks, Warren. I wonder when we'll talk about them. And then two against Seattle. Swept in a brief 2-game series against Seattle. Warren, you could speak on that a little bit more. I just wanted to kind of highlight that Jackson Merrill is an all-star in his rookie year. I'm not sure any of us would have guessed that he was the Jackson to kind of rise above the rest, but he's been excellent. You know, Luis Camposano is also an all star. You know, there's a lot of other guys we could have said as a snub, but honestly, I think this team is pretty fairly represented. So, rough week for the Padres, but heading into the all star break, I think they can find their momentum. And with the Dodgers kind of scrambling, I think that there's blood in the water. I think that there's very much a chance at a run of the division towards the end of the season for this team.
Point out a storyline, shall we? You know how teams like Atlanta and the Dodgers and maybe the Yanks and the Phillies, they might be so good that they just need to make it to the dance. Do you think any part of that is what's brewing in San Diego, where, hey, we know we've got the talent, but we don't need to be as engaged as we could be during the meat of this thing? Maybe don't show all our hands right now, right? Offensively or otherwise. Maybe not be as good as we could be. Are they pulling some punches a bit is the storyline I'm trying to plant on us, because yeah, this is a team that feels as if they're composed of enough stars to be able to race ahead when they're ready. The thing is that they're just not. I don't want to say they're choosing not to
I
play
think they're
as
just
good as they
streaky,
could, but I did.
Warren.
Okay, streaky is definitely something I can relate to. San Diego does share their spring training facility with Seattle,
There you
so
go.
maybe streakiness runs in that segment of Arizona, guys. And yes, again, I've made it about my team, but the thing is that these Padres are entirely capable. For a while, they were striking out more batters than any other team in the league. Not pulling up my pitching numbers to double check if that's still the case, but the point is that they have it on the pitching side. We know they have it on the offensive side. I think they will turn it on and they will make it happen. I don't know if they're going to be movers at the trade deadline, though, because they probably feel like they've got everything they need, especially with an overachieving Jurickson Profar. Um, Maybe you get one more outfielder, but I don't know, man. I do think this is a snake in the grass San Diego Padres team. I picked them to be a wild card contender. Let's see if they have done enough to set themselves up, or if they'll kick themselves, actually, for not maybe making one or two more moves. Do you see anything they can do at this moment to really underline that they intend to be a playoff team in October?
Yeah, I could see a bullpen arm and or a pitcher. I think the offense is okay. I think the closer is great. You have a couple solid starters, but the bullpen's been good too. But like one bullpen arm to keep the consistency, or a good starter to put less pressure on the bullpen, is probably all they need. And I could see them aggressively trying to go after one of the starters available, maybe like an Eric Feedy, that kind of type, to join his
Ooh.
former teammate in Dylan Cease, I suppose.
Not a bad call, Dan, and we'll let it lie there for these extremely interesting, for this specific team. Move us on from the Padres out of the beautiful California weather and into the chilly Midwest, because I want to shoot at another team that tends to be in the National League playoff conversation, but didn't play like it this week, Dan. May I call out the Milwaukee Brewers, please?
You may.
Oh, thanks so much. So Milwaukee guys went 4-6, just two steps backwards this week. Not as bad as it could be, but bad enough that I want to place them in this spot of our rankings. They are 54-40, still legitimately able to call themselves in the National League playoff race. No worries yet, but That's not true. There's plenty of worries around pitching, especially. We talk about it week in and week out, how pitching is just something that they can't seem to stabilize right now, and it will potentially eventually unravel them, in my mind. Good news on the horizon that Devin Williams is on his way back. The famed closer who was even rumored to be, available before the season started if this Milwaukee Brewers team tanked, but they're doing anything but. The offense has buoyed a lot of negative situations from the mound for this team. It just didn't manifest as strongly this week. They first split a series of 4 games with the Rockies, not ideal for any playoff contender. They also dropped 2 of 3 to the Dodgers. We talked about that just moments ago, so that's a little discouraging. They have to be near the Dodgers in our countdown for that reason. And Pittsburgh also took 2 of 3 from them. And that's a divisional rival who's got some buzz around them, and you really don't want to give them any more ground than they did. And Skeens did pitch against them in the finale of that series and made them look absolutely silly for the majority of the game, pitching up to a 7th inning no before being pulled. But the bullpen was able to hold that shutout from the Brewers. So the offense is clearly something that can't get them through every scenario, and that's what I want to take away from this week for them. What do you think? At this stage, Dan, it feels as if Milwaukee is beatable, and there are teams like Pittsburgh. I mean, all of them in this division are still breathing down Milwaukee's necks. They're not safe, Dan. How scared are you for them this week?
Sorry, Warren. I'm just checking. I'm just doing what the Milwaukee does every day and seeing how low their divisional lead is now. So they're 5 games back to
Ooh.
St. Louis with the Pirates at 8.5. And you're right, Warren. It's been a great overperformance in the hands of the offense. Recent trade for Aaron Savali is good to reinforce. If they really want to be aggressive and go after this division title, I think it means another trade, something on the pitching side of things. I mean, they have 2 starting all-stars, and that's without Bryce Terang. So they have position players who are all-star level and playing up to it. It's just the pitching
Oh,
side of things. So if they choose to go for it, I think they could make an aggressive move at the deadline, and they could retain this. If they don't, Warren, I'm saying this is a two-sided coin for my prediction right here. If they make a move, they can keep it.
ooh.
If they don't, the Cardinals are getting the division. They have all the momentum, they have the pieces. The Cardinals will take the division if Milwaukee doesn't get aggressive. I'm calling it now.
Ooh, or somebody will is what I'll say. Because
Sure.
yeah, you're loving the idea of the Cardinals being the team to do it, but a Chicago team that figures it out could. They're not far enough
They could.
back. The Reds team that figures it out could. The Skeens team, sorry, the Pirates team that
Skeens.
rides the momentum.
The
What
Pittsburgh
can I say?
Steamers.
Dude, the fire is real. This is still the best division in baseball in
It's
terms of
exciting.
competitiveness. It is. And the Brewers are taking the step back they needed to make this an even more compelling race. But, dude, I'm telling you, William Contreras is one of my favorite players in the league. I love the Reese Hoskins effect. I love the Jackson Churio presence. I love Bryce Terrain and his steals and defensive prowess.
29 bags.
This is such a good Milwaukee team that anything can truly happen, and the ifs are flowing like water through our predictions, guys. We really can't tell, and it's so much fun. You better be watching this division. It's what baseball is all about this year, in my humble opinion, because everybody's got to swing at it. Milwaukee is one of the better bats in the lineup. Can they continue to slug their way to success? It's truly the path they need to take, and it's compelling baseball to watch. So, Milwaukee is down here, but again, this entire division is watchable, and you'll see that as we continue to break down the other 4 teams later on in our talk. But maybe not right now. Dan, 22nd is yours. Why don't you take us into our teams of mediocrity? Because that was the last of our teams that were really struggling this week.
Yeah, man. This whole little middle pack, we got a lot of teams with similar records, and we won't take too long going through a lot of the same stuff we have. I think we've heard a lot of these stories before, Warren. At 22, it's going to have to be San Francisco for me. I think they
Ooh.
made another couple moves. I think they heard what you said, Warren. They were listening to the show, and they were like, oh, this guy doesn't like our culture. Well, let's take the current longest tenured player we have in Austin Slater because we got rid of all the rest. Let's trade him to the Reds. And hey, who else does the young kids on the team look up to and respect? Nick Ahmed? Let's DFA him. So just more of the salary and age reduction, Warren. This team is giving a chance to the younger players, and it kind of oddly is coming at a time when they were just on a little hot streak. They were starting to do a little bit better. I don't regret cutting some of those veteran bats, but you're just no consistency. Before it was injuries. That's the problem. That's uncontrollable. Now it's controllable, and you're just still playing with the roster where you're not letting them find their groove. The Giants are like the most frustrating team to be right on the bubble and just not be able to go past it. And I don't think they will, Warren. I think this is where they're going to stay. A couple games under 500 on the outside looking in. Oh, and Snell found his talent. He found it. Took a while. A couple wanted posters later. He found it, Warren. He's got it. It's all good.
I'm sorry, legitimate laughter there because Blake Snell has struggled a lot. Yes, he found his talent. Cool. Pitch your
Found it.
ass off. Yeah, pitch your butt off. Do your best. It's whatever. You know how I feel. Matter of fact, hot take. I think it's the Giants that should be moving to Las Vegas, not the
Oh, whoa.
because
The San
the
Francisco
Giants.
Athletics?
I'm telling you, the Las Vegas Giants, baby.
Yeah.
The reason why is because just like Las Vegas as a culture doesn't celebrate its history and doesn't celebrate its tenure and doesn't celebrate like a whole lot of the stuff that gets long in the tooth and doesn't make as much money, right? Well, the Giants do that to their players. Like, you take your history, you take your longevity, you take your tenure, you take your pension, and you flush it over and over again. It doesn't pay to be a loyal player to the San Francisco organization. And as a guy who feels like loyalty is a core value he really does appreciate, I just don't like San Francisco Giants. I just don't. Like, it doesn't make me want to root for them. So you keep clipping all these players off at the heels, and you're going to lose everyone next year when it's time to re-sign guys like Matt Chapman and Blake Snell. None of them are going to want to stay. And I can feel like this is the time where San Francisco, like this was maybe their last great swing at having a decent club for these chunks of years. Like, I don't know if I'd want to play for them if I were a player starting next year. Just saying. So, I don't know, man. I could sit here and say how anything can happen, how the sluggers can get hot, how the pitching can continue to figure it out and give some love to Jordan Hicks for being who he's been for this team. And there's stuff to say that's positive, but I just don't want to. I don't like San Francisco. So shoo. Thanks for throwing them first out of the mediocrity pool, Dan. I will go ahead and shoot next and shoot right at one of the low-hanging fruit just to continue to butcher the National League West. Let's get the Rockies out of the way. The last of the pretenders, the really bad teams in the league. Just get them out of the way. This week, though, they almost went 500. They had 11 games, a large clip by the standards of the rest of the league. They gave up 6 losses to the 5 wins they took, so only one step backwards. And when you think about some of the teams they played, that's impressive. They did play 4 games against Milwaukee, took a split. They played 3 games against Kansas City, and Dan, in kind of a shocker we'll need to talk about pretty soon, I think, Kansas City gave up 2 of 3 to the Rockies. So what's up with Kansas? Might have to chat on that shortly. And then Cincinnati was another 4-game set, and they did take 3 away from these Rockies, which Cincinnati kind of had to do because they're still trying to prove they're in this playoff contention and consideration, which the Rockies are not. Same old stuff, man. This should be a team we take a quick lap around. We want Ryan McMahon off this team because he's got one of the better batting averages in the league, right? He's a solid player and their all-star. So I wouldn't mind taking him in Seattle. You probably shouldn't mind taking him in New York if the reasoning justified it in your mind. But tell me about what you feel about the Rockies otherwise.
Yeah, well, we'll start off by saying that they played, 7 games at home and got 4 wins out of it. So 4-3 at home, 2 of those against Kansas City. That's one thing I'll say about that series. Warren, Kansas City didn't have its best starters, but really, Rockies overpowered them at home, and that's been kind of the tale of it. So Not a lot else to add. You made a couple good points. Some pieces will be moved from this team. I don't expect a huge sell off. Cal Quantrill is the name that I'd like to see. Uh, Maybe not on the Mets, but just move to a competitive team because I think he's a great pitcher and I'd like to see him maybe even make a postseason run. Also,
Yeah,
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
just gonna say about Cal, like Cal Quattrell, he was one of those pitchers who got picked up by the Rockies that people are like, oh, poor Quattrell. I guess there's his career going up in smoke.
Yeah,
Dakota Hudson, for example, was a similar signing, and he already got DFA'd by the Rockies. And if you
right.
get DFA'd by the Rockies, it's because you're that bad. So like. I'm happy for Cal's story that it's returned to a place where he could add some value. And I guess that boring yes and was all I intended to say when I interrupted you. So keep going.
Yo, you're fine. The only other thing I was going to add is that Marquez is going to be back after the All Star game, which might be a good reason to move somebody like Quantrill if you're not going to re sign him. And Marquez is just the most electric pitcher that they've had for years. Always exciting to watch. So looking forward to that. But other than that, a week that's probably better than we expected for the Rockies, but they're going to need a lot more of them to move further up the rankings.
They probably won't get it. We haven't talked
No.
about any of these teams like future lineups, so we'll do it for the Rockies for fun. They will cap off their pre All Star run against the Mets, and you better believe you want some wins out of that series, Dan.
Yeah.
After the All Star break, they get 3 against the Giants. I don't care who wins that, and then 3 against Boston, and you better believe Boston is legit, and we cannot stop being shocked by it. Apparently. But we'll talk more about Boston later, of course. Good luck, Colorado. It's a rocky terrain for a reason. Hmm. I really didn't mean to make that pun,
That's a
Dan.
good one.
I really didn't.
That was a good one.
Thanks, man. I'm proud of myself. Go ahead, sir. You are on deck for the next pick, number 20, the last of the 20s. So who's guarding the bottom third of the league?
So this one is a little bit tougher, Warren. I start looking at series, and series wins are pretty important, especially this time of year. We're talking about tiebreakers and things. So
Yeah.
right here, I'm going to put in the Kansas City Royals. We've referenced it a couple
Yeah.
times. Good team, underperformance. They went 4-4 this week. 2 series
Mm-hmm.
losses. They lost 1 out of 3. I'm sorry, they lost 2 out of 3 to Tampa Bay, and then 2 out of 3 to Colorado. We just spoke on. And then they had a quick 2-game series against St. Louis, a rival that's, I mean, intra-division, I should say, rival, a team that is very much
Sure.
on the rebound right now and has been pretty competitive. They won both of those games against the Cardinals. Got a quick little
Yeah.
series win there. Doing the Mets some favors, by the way, helping us out with the wild card. So thanks for that. But yeah, weird week for Kansas City as we get towards the All-Star break. I'm not sure you could find a team that needs it as much as them. Warren. It's not like the injuries are necessarily piling up, but they do have their bullpens a little bit more beat up than they'd like to be. And I think for a younger lineup like we see with Kansas City, fatigue is a real thing. I think it's very fair to see it start setting in. The offense is slowing down a little bit, and the rotation has still been excellent, pretty consistently. Like Brady Singer's been great, Lugo and Reagans are leading the team. Like great to see, but the offense definitely looks like they've been slowing up. I think they need a break. I think they need a little bit of a rebound. And I'm not sure if that means that they need to add anything necessarily. I think they just need a refresh. Don't get too aggressive, Kansas City. We're still 1 year out of the rebuild.
Oh, Dan, how do I make this about Seattle? Let's see. Well, Kansas City's +7, Seattle's +9, and
Mhm.
Dan, you ask, is there another team that's as exhausted going into the All-Star break as
Yeah.
Kansas City? There's the parallel. That's where these two teams mentally for me make sense in comparison. Yeah, Kansas City's tired. They need a rest. They need a breather. They want to recharge their batteries. Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be in the home run derby though, even though he's one of the lesser home run hitting stars in the league right now. Talk about getting that nod purely because of the buzz around this
Yeah.
team
Doesn't
and
even have the
really
most on
around.
his team. Perez has more.
Right. Right, dude. Why isn't Salvador? Is he in that though? Is Salvador Perez slugging? I forgot. But no. The point is here is that this team just does need that breather you're talking about. I have total faith that they're going to be pretty tough to push completely out of the playoff race as the season progresses into its final chapters. This is a really exciting team. The only problem might be the experience level of playing competitive baseball. Salvador Perez is maybe the guy to say, not really. Like, I'm here, I'm the captain. We have a whole culture built around me. But maybe one more or two more veteran pieces just to shore this up and ensure they don't lose too much footing against teams that are overachieving or that need to achieve a lot in order to make it in, like uh, Houston and Detroit and Boston, of course. Like, these are teams that they need to make sure they stay one step ahead of, and those are tough teams right now to just assume you're in a position that you're better. So I would say grab one or two more if you can. And this team has spent so much in the offseason, you have to believe they're willing to do just a kiss more to lock in the perception of a winning culture for this group. But let the breather happen. We'll come back in 10 days, and maybe there'll be some exciting new buzz around a Royals team resurging and ready to absolutely lock down a playoff spot in 2024, Dan. Because I have faith in it. I really do. Not worried at all, even though they sit at number 20 in our rankings. We'll see if we get worried next week. It really could happen. It really could happen. Everybody's kind of trying to figure it out. So, Dan, I suppose, as you've called out Kansas City, one of your pet teams, I'm kind of feeling pressured to call out one of my pet teams. And I guess no reason not to make it about the Mariners one final time today, because I'm tired of doing it for everybody else. Let's shoot the last of my bullets for my own team. And you've been doing a good job of putting me where you feel my place is the last couple of weeks. I might as well take some ownership of that choice, and I think this is a good spot to put my Mariners at 4-4. Thank you for agreeing with me, Dan.
I mean,
You're
I had
so
him
proud.
one place lower, to be fair, but I still agree overall.
Well, if I hadn't done it here, you would have done it next.
Yes.
So here we are. The Seattle Mariners did go 4-4 this week. We dropped 2 against the Baltimore Orioles out of 3 in one of the more predictable outcomes I was expecting, of course, because the Orioles have been traditionally good, but otherwise were not this week, actually, in a major way. More mediocre were the Orioles this week. Anyway, we'll not make it about Baltimore. Let's make this about Seattle. Toronto then came into town and took 2 of 3 from us. And I will tell you, Dan, point blank, we had so many chances to win that series that I just wanted to throw up when
Close
I saw
games.
Stop it. Stop it. It was a march of mediocrity. We looked especially exhausted in that series, and I was really worried we had nothing left to give before the All-Star break. So I was really pleasantly surprised when on the road, no less, where we've struggled. We did take both those opportunities against the San Diego Padres in beautiful, shiny San Diego. Can't believe that we looked good enough to win both those games, really, with the way we've been playing. So yeah, a mediocre week. We go 4-4 and tread the water. And the hero of the week has got to be Cal Raleigh because he continues to whack home runs on both sides of the plate. He's up to 19 now, more than some of those guys in the home run derby, more than some of the all-stars that got named. And I have been more aware of the disrespect the media puts on Seattle than ever in the last couple of weeks while they've been trying to avoid giving up this lead to Houston. It's amazing how much the media hates the Pacific Northwest and my Mariners. It's a bummer. But we've got to buck this trend. We've got to fix this offense. Our strikeouts are still worst in the league, and you better believe I'll do the justice. It's 979 strikeouts, Dan. I think they've increased about 200 plus since the last time you and I spoke.
Oh,
And
my heart.
gosh,
Oh,
I don't. I'm sorry. You
that's
guys
rough.
may be sitting there going, Warren, how can you believe in this team at all when they're on pace to set a new team record for most strikeouts in the history of Major League Baseball? I get it. I know. We're like feast or famine. If we make contact, the ball goes flying and our offense soars. If we don't, we look like largely what we've looked like this season. So, Dan, I'll let you ask questions to make sure I'm not saying stuff you don't want to hear.
Well, man, you mentioned being streaky before, and I just noticed a 2 losses, 2 wins, 2 losses, 2 wins. You mentioned the home record too. They've had a really good home record. That's kind of shaken up lately. A couple of reinforcements coming. Gregory Santos, I saw, is back, and I read that Brian Wu will be back. But even with all of those, reinforcing an already great pitching staff, The team average is now 30th in the league. You got on base percentage at 25th and an OPS at 27th. Just bottom of the barrel in all of these categories. We already talked about some different moves from this past offseason, but going forward, the rest of this way, let's say they make the trade, Warren. Let's say they get two of the premier players you want. Your prediction before the year was like a playoff run towards a World Series. If they make a couple moves, where do you think the ceiling is for this team?
Oh, dude, I'm really optimistic to the point where I like what we are and I like who we can be. I really do. I'm still feeling like the offense is underperforming compared to what we want, what we expected them to be. If a Luke Rayleigh, a Dom Canzone, or a Jorge Polanco warms up just enough at the plate to be a consistent, bat, like this, we've said it all year, this is not a team that is as offensively bad as they appear on paper. The only guy who I think isn't smoke and mirrors with how mediocre he's been this year is probably JP Crawford. As much as I love JP on a culture level, and that I love he's kind of our Zen guy who keeps everybody cool in the pocket, the truth is that offensively he hasn't gotten it done this year. Haniger hasn't gotten it done this year, and I've already talked about how much I'm hoping Polanco figures it out. And early returns since his IL stint came to an end say he might just turn it around. So I'm not going to sit here and say I believe in the team as the way they are. I would prefer to have a couple more bullpen pieces, even with Gregory Santos back, who I'm so excited about because he is a flamethrower.
Yeah.
He's going to help us a lot in the back of the bullpen, where Andres Munoz has been one of the hardest working pitchers in the league, should be an all-star, and is definitely not is definitely in danger of being overexposed at this point. You can only rely on his slider and fastball so long before the league figures out that he's kind of stressed out easily if you don't swing at them. So, oops, did I reveal a secret?
Edit that out.
Hey, I love my team. I would love to believe we're going to continue to outrun the Astros, but the Astros are coming so hard and so hot that it's not easy to do. Yeah, we've been holding at 2 games. Yeah, we've been holding at 2 games this whole week. Hello, 4-4 record means we did nothing to create the space. So, Houston's coming. The race is on. I think this team could definitely be a playoff contender if a couple of these leaky holes get tied up. I want Jazz Chisholm. If we can't get him, I'm down for a Tommy Pham. If we can't get him, I don't even mind a Whit Merrifield, who's a contact guy that the Philadelphia Phillies just decided wasn't good enough for them. Well, he might be good enough for Seattle when you can steal a base, when you can make some contact, when you can play second, and when you can play an outfield. So I'm just saying, that's not the worst guy we might pick up the pieces from if that's the case. Whit Merrifield, guys. Other than that, bullpen pieces. Yep, I want an Austin Adams or something like that. I wouldn't mind if Emerson Hancock gets turned into a guy who throws out of the bullpen, or even Brian Wu if he continues to have injury issues. I wish the team would get a little creative there. I don't know why Emerson Hancock doesn't get to throw for this team when he did a serviceable job covering Brian Wu's starts while Brian was injured. But I'm probably talking more about Seattle than you all want me to, because a lot of people don't like talking about Seattle, or the media would like them more. So I'll stop, Dan. I'm just going to stop.
Warren, Seattle, I think, has a series coming up against Houston. That could be huge. So we'll see.
It is.
We'll see how that goes, huh?
It's the first series after the All-Star break, and we are at home. So it is a extremely important series. Nobody doubts that. It's so important that the Mariners made it their first firework night after the All-Star break, because they know we might have to, dry our tears with some flames.
And
following
Warren, post All-Star break, both teams have reset rotations, so you're kind of getting like 1, 2, 3 from each team. So it's the closest we might get to like a playoff sim this year.
I'm gonna watch that series, Dan. Don't worry. You don't have to hype it up.
Watch that series.
Let's go. Yeah, it's a pretty important one. The AL playoff race is a big deal to both those teams. So Seattle and Houston will be really fun to watch and really stressful for me. But that's it. I'm going to try not to make anything else about my Mariners. I really shot every bullet out of my clip this week, and I feel good about where it's left. I wish Brian Wu a healthy start tonight against the Angels, because it's nice to see him back on the mound. he's just really hard to figure out where he fits in our plan with his injury scares all the time. All right, that was like 6 minutes on Seattle. Thank you guys. You've been very generous. You won't find 6 minutes on Seattle in any other media that tries to cover all 30 teams. So I feel so proud and grateful. All right, Dan. Number 18. I took your 18th off the board. Who are you going to put in its place?
I'm going to keep it in the AL, dude. It's going to be the Baltimore Orioles. Pretty
Whoa.
low down there, man. But we kind of alluded to it earlier that they're not taking advantage of a slumping Yankees team. This past week, they went 4-5. They had that series against Seattle where they took 2 out of 3. They took 2 out of 3 against Oakland, and they got swept by the Cubs, Warren. Like, just
Ooh.
dropped all of that momentum that they had. I mean, this is a team that we've already talked about it. They have all stars all over the roster on the pitching side and the positional side of the ball. They're still relatively healthy. They've had some issues with Bradish and Means, but they've persevered through that with a healthy Corbin Burns. We've seen the young guys all take a step this year, and let's not forget, Warren, like one of the guys I wanted to highlight was James McCann coming off the bench and backup catching for this team. Old man James McCann has been a great veteran presence and has a pretty good ERA with his pitchers when he's in there, which is important, going towards a postseason run. So a little bit of a rougher week for Baltimore, but not worried on them too much. I'm actually kind of split on what this team does at the deadline, Warren. I mean, they don't need to do anything, I don't think. But do you think they like go in aggressive and get somebody off the board just to really stamp the letter and send it?
Yeah, but where? I mean, the outfield is where a lot of the guys that will be traded from can bolster, and they don't. They really kind of don't need that. Correct me if I'm
You're
wrong.
right.
So I do think if it's one thing that feels like it could use more of, this Baltimore lineup could use yet another veteran presence like a James McCann, but one that's offensively minded instead of, strengthening
Like a
the
DH.
basement. Yeah, one more slugger. But even then, dude, I mean, every time I look at these highlights, it's somebody different making the impact. It's O'Hearn, it's Cowser, it's Westberg. There's just no real slumpers except when they all go cold at the same time, like you're arguing we saw this week. And so you got to protect yourself with a hitter that swings hot no matter what. And I don't know how many mercenaries like that are out there outside of the ones we keep naming in circles like Tommy Pham, you know? But that could be the right kind of guy to get for a team like this at this stage. A guy like Tommy Pham who plays with a chip on his shoulder all 9 innings at all times and doesn't really care what the scoreboard says. He's out there to make his numbers. That's
Yeah.
who you
What
want.
about
I can't think.
I don't know if this would happen in division, but what about a Justin Turner type?
Ooh, another great choice. I mean, there's been some buzz from a certain Pacific Northwest team that they might be interested in Justin Turner too, with the way he's been
So
playing.
yeah, because he's some
Um,
infield depth with the power. That could be
yeah,
interesting.
that's true. They're starting third baseman out in Baltimore. If you could pull it off the top of your head, is that Cowser? Is that Westberg? I'm a bad person for not knowing this
It's
off the top of my head at this stage of the
Ramon
season. But
Urias right now.
yeah, that guy can be upgraded. Can he?
Yes.
Can he be upgraded? So you're right. Maybe that's the kind of guy who you get to come in and play third base for you instead, or a Ryan McMahon. Maybe a Ryan McMahon. Now that I think about it,
Ooh, they could
not
pay
that
for it too.
exactly. I mean that would be a really shrewd get. That'd be a good coup because that guy's playing well out of a team nobody's looking at as a competitor. Ryan McMahon is an all-star,
Yeah,
and he's one of the finer bats in the league. So
and the
yeah,
Rockies would love to kick him to another league, another side of the country where they don't have to see him very much playing against them
yes.
in Colorado. It's a good call, Warren. I like it.
Yay, I'm really glad I dug one up when we were digging for gold there. But we'll leave Baltimore there. We're not worried about them being playoff contenders, guys. It's pretty hard for me to envision them falling completely out of the race. Dan, nod if you agree. He's nodding. So we'll move forward with the 17th team in the league. Time to talk about Tampa, dude. What is what is happening with Tampa? It's
I
been
think they
the
don't
question.
know.
Exactly. God, the momentum is hot and cold and up and down and tug of war all the way in Tampa. The Tampa Bay tug of war is what they're nicknamed this year. This was a team that, and one of the last ones that had just barely a losing record at 4-5, and they did win three against Kansas City, so they deserve to be not three. They won two of three, excuse me, against Kansas City, so they do deserve to be higher in our countdown than Kansas for sure. It was a little concerning to watch them get swept by Texas. Not sure what happened,
Yeah.
and truly, that's kind of why they need to be here. Is because it's you're right, Dan. They don't know who they are. And I think another American League wild card fringe contender will be talked about pretty soon for the same reason, because it just seems like Tampa could take advantage of poor pitching in those situations where they're matched up against it. They do have the lineup capable of taking advantage of arms that are just not able to put out as much heat or as much precision as some of the others. But when they play anybody who has any sort of stiffness, they just kind of fold and lay down. Um, they did take two of three against New York to cap their week, the Yankees, that is. So, absolutely got to give them credit for beating two teams that they really had no right beating when you look at playoff contention. It's just strange. That sweep at the hands of Texas makes it all think that no matter how many steps forward these Tampa Bay Rays take, you can't trust it. You just can't trust it. So they sit at 46-47, a shred below 500, still very much in a playoff race, but we don't know why. We just don't know why. We also found out Wander Franco officially got charged for all the evil stuff that we suspected him of doing for the last year or so. So that's officially, truly out the window. Drat it for the legacy he could have had with this team. Kind of a rough week for Tampa, even if really 4 out of 5 wasn't that bad. What do you feel, Dad?
Yeah, well, it's also a vibe shift for the team. I think we might, after some good series wins against Kansas City and the Yankees, the sell off has begun. We've seen Savali and then Phil Maton moved off of this team, and I think that's just the
Yes.
beginning. There will be a number of position players moved. You're right, the Wander Franco thing is pretty final. I don't think there was any chance of that coming the other way. I don't think Tampa was expecting him to return, but they had to wait, and they did, and it's official. And I think you'll see a lot more players moved off of this team. And they're a good baseball team. In a lot of ways, they remind me of almost Milwaukee with their offense and how they have so many guys who just hang around. Obviously, they don't have the speed or the power that Milwaukee does, and that's kind of the difference. But they have a lot of good, solid bats I could see moved before the deadline. I think at this point, you kind of have to, with the Franco thing being official, keep the sell off going, be aggressive, keep a couple of the players. Like if you can keep Randy, and if you could keep maybe like a Palacios or some of these younger guys, get rid of everybody else. Like just sell off Zach Eflin as a premier starter. He should be pitching for a playoff team. Like you
Mm-hmm.
have Taj Bradley, you could re-sign Zach Little. Like you have pieces there you can build around. But I'm really getting tired of seeing the Rays skirt around. And like I said, they're not a bad baseball team. They're good. They're just so aimless right now. I would love to see them just go one way or another. Buy in, sell off, do something. Stop being so confusing.
Well, yeah, that's true. We're tired of the not being able to tell what temperature the water is. It's like getting into the hot tub and going, did I even get into anything? That was a terrible analogy. I'm sorry I said that, guys. But the point I want to roll with next here is look, their top WAR guy is third baseman Isaac Paredes, definitely a guy who has trade buzz around him. And we talk about who can go to Baltimore to make that team even better. We're thinking about options like that.
He's clutch too.
That, ooh, yeah. And I wouldn't mind an Isaac Paredes, of course, in a Pacific Northwest team. One of them, one of the several. But these guys just don't do it again consistently. Again, consistency is king. And a lot of me wonders, kind of like with San Diego, did they really even want to be the team that wins enough to make the playoffs this year? Like we talked about in the beginning of the year that it felt like they were consciously taking a step back, and they've been playing on the line the entire time. And
Better
you have
than
to
we
think
thought.
when better than we thought. You have to think though, when push comes to shove, they're not able to beat the teams that they're gonna need to beat to be in the playoffs when it's all said and done, and they don't play like a team that's hungry enough to grab it by the horns. So you're right, Dan. Again, ambiguity is swirling around this team as it is for a lot of the National League wildcard contenders at the moment, as it is for some of the other. teams running for an American League playoff spot that just don't know if they'll get there, like a Detroit or a Toronto. Teams we'll discuss here in the next couple of conversations, no doubt. I don't blame you, Dan. It's so hard to really know what we're getting when we look at Tampa Bay. And when they look in the mirror, do they know? I can't wait for the next couple of weeks to pass so we finally get a definitive answer, dude. It really can't happen much longer after that if it doesn't happen in the
Yeah.
next 10 games. So there you go. I'm sorry, guys. That was the most lukewarm attempt at coverage for a team that we've had all year, but that's just because the Rays are swimming in lukewarm waters themselves. We're just not sure if they have it or if they want it or if they feel it at all. It's strange, but it's fun to see them do their absolute best and still stay in the conversation. Number 16, Dan, falls to you, the last team before our midway point. Who do you want to throw here before we get the guardians of the middle, so to speak?
Yeah, last team of the back half. Let's do the Oakland Athletics. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I
So,
think so.
yeah, a little bit of a better week from their standards to put them up here. They went 5-4, and they started off with a sweep of the Angels. Not sure Oakland has had a sweep this year, so that's pretty impressive. Unfortunately, didn't really carry that momentum into the rest of the week. They dropped 2 out of 3 against Baltimore, and then 2 out of 3 in Boston. So 5-4 on the week. Oakland has not moved anybody, so that's why we still see them go off on these little win tears, and they're not a playoff team or anything like that. So the only thing they're waiting for is market value at this point. Still good to see the ceilings of some of these guys. I was just gonna say, Warren, that as far as all stars are concerned, the biggest snub in my mind off the Oakland roster, and we all knew Mason Miller was gonna be an all star, right? But I'm I'm a little surprised that they kept Brent Rooker off of this lineup, considering some of the other names. I know he's not necessarily the best on the team. You could make the argument that, hey, maybe like Langeliers is more deserving of
Yeah.
that. But for me personally, it's Rooker. He's been dynamic. He's been impressive. He's not a rookie. He's been in the league for a couple of years. He's got a slugging percentage of 538 for him, and 5 stolen bags to
Sure.
go along with it. So as far as all stars concerned, I was a little disappointed to see him not named to that list.
And a 2.6 WAR too. He's leading the team in that area, and that's usually a pretty clear indicator of of who's your guy. So he's been a good guy for Oakland, even though we've thought of him as having one foot out the door the entire year because he's one of the most obvious grabs for a team that needs some slugging power at the deadline. So the buzz, of course, will continue to be around which team decides to scoop him up. Well, I could think of a team in his division, in the Oakland division, that could really benefit from him. Maybe one that's got a space needle on its horizon or something. But other than that, I can think of several, of course, as we go in circles about slugging outfielders that would appreciate
Yeah,
grabbing
he'll go
someone
somewhere. I
like.
think it just again
Oh,
might
as
be
soon as
after
possible.
like Luis Robert Jr. or something.
Sure, yeah, but maybe it shouldn't be because a 2.6 WAR is a lot to grab,
True.
and you want to grab a bat like that quick. I can see him going to the other league. Think of maybe an Atlanta that could benefit from Brent Rooker ASAP. This seems like a guy Atlanta should have jumped on like 3 weeks ago. So
Sure.
that's who I'm calling gets him. But fun stuff for Oakland only because that the sale off for some of these pieces are coming. They'll play 3 against Philadelphia before the All-Star break to continue to make them look pretty pathetic, you would think, because Philadelphia is certainly scary and mighty and all that stuff. After the All-Star break, they get 3 against the Angels. That's a great series for them to decide how they feel after the break. And then Houston will probably remind them of how bad they are. But Oakland is a team that should sell soon. No reason not to, and we know that already. Really, this should have lasted just about as long as the Chicago White Sox talk did, so we're sorry it took so long. Let's move on to the middle of the pack, shall we, Dan? The middle of the pack, the number 15 spot, is controversial on all sorts of levels because this team needs to be one that still feels like they have a chance, but are really on the outside of that fringe. And what team belongs in that area more than anything, Dan? Say it with me now. 1, 2, 3. The
The Pittsburgh
Toronto Blue Jays.
Oh.
Oh! So look, listen, Dan, you're right on the money. That was the other team I thought about putting at number 15. To be official, I'm going with the Toronto Blue Jays. I almost went with Pittsburgh, but the truth is Pittsburgh's just more believable right now as a team that can put some pieces together and make a run than I feel the Toronto Blue Jays are. I already called this team officially done on our
It's true.
barely canonical episode when we broke down our mid-season, touch-ins with our preseason predictions. That's when I called Toronto done, and I stand by it. I still stand by it, even though they treaded water fine at 5-5 this week. I just don't see them doing enough to earn their way back into this playoff race. And will point out that they gave up 3 of 4 to the Houston Astros, one of the other teams that they are chasing for playoff consideration. Another team, however, that at this moment is not even a wild card team, so you don't want to lose 3 of 4 to them. They did take 2 of 3 from Seattle. I told you how I feel about that. We had every right to win that series at least 6 times, and we didn't. So Toronto, fine. Take it and go away. And then San Francisco was another team that gave up 2 of 3 to them. They had a decent week. We get it. But they didn't get another impressive performance against Houston, telling us that they can't chase down even that kind of team. And as good as Houston could be en route to getting back into the playoff picture, that's not a good sign for Toronto. So we've talked about how Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero may actually not be on the table. They may continue to try to build the team around these guys moving forward. And boy, do we feel like they're losing their marbles or what? Is this a team that's going insane, Dan? I'm starting to feel that myself.
Definitely. They're so Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde on the field. You never know what you're going to get, and it's so frustrating. But when they
Yeah.
perform well and you have these little stretches where like Turner, Vladdy, and Bichette are all going off, when George Springer was doing well for a little bit there, it's really hard to justify selling these guys and to get rid of them. You went out, you got them, you've had some level of success. It really does mean like tearing it down. If you move out like a Vladdy, you're not getting back an Anthony Rizzo to take first base. It doesn't work like that. You're getting prospects you
No.
won't see for years. So it's a
Yeah.
decision. It's a big decision of do we commit to this rebuild? Because Vladdy's the piece. You want to sell off the other pieces and re-sign Vladdy? You can do that. But if you sell Vladdy, I just don't see you building a team around Bo Bichette. I'm sorry. I just really don't see him being the cornerstone of that. So I think they're reaching a turning point. Their rotation is certainly reaching a turning point. You got a lot of guys like Bassett and Kikuchi and Barrios not under contract. We just saw Kevin Gausman against Seattle. I'm sorry, Warren, but actually pitch his best game of the year. So possibly coming back in that regard. So you have so many assets you could sell and create a strong team for maybe a long time in Toronto. I've already told you that I'm on the edge. Like this is another decision where if they want to sell, I think it'd be really good for them. If they want to buy, I think that they could get back into it. But I'm tempted to agree with you that I'm starting to see them just. It would take so much for them to make the postseason at this rate. I mean, they're just trying to get out of last place in their own division. So I don't know if they're going to necessarily give up on being aggressive, but I do think it's safe to say that a postseason berth is probably out of reach at this point.
Oh, good. So in my notes next to Warren, Toronto is done. I can put Dan probably out of reach. Oh, good. I'm so
That's
glad
good.
you're.
That's fine.
What a strong stance you take on this team after everything they've shown us. But I'm gonna go ahead and say I feel like this is one of the most confused front offices and coaching staffs in the league. You talked a
Yeah.
couple weeks ago about how maybe a new coach could really do something good for this team, and they keep on wasting time. Is the way I want to put it. I feel like they just keep wasting time, and they can't.
Sorry,
Yeah.
really quick, just want to add that we just saw a Canadian team play for the Stanley Cup, Warren. Canada hasn't won a
Hmm.
Stanley Cup in 30 years, and you saw all of Canada get behind them to go after that. We've seen the Raptors go on their run before. Like, Toronto's the only baseball team in Canada. It feels like such a marketing opportunity to really try and field just a good team. You don't have to win the World Series, just a good team. Like we had the last 7, 8, 9 years, a playoff team every year that was exciting to watch. Like, just get back to
Yeah.
that. and you will have the fans supporting you. You'll have the money coming in to pay whatever players you want. Like, I don't get why they're on teetering this line. Like, just commit to a rebuild.
And Dan, you know, when we opened the season, we thought they were committing, didn't we? We
Yeah.
thought they were committing. We
Yep.
thought they put so many interesting veteran pieces around so many of their core that
Yep.
they had done enough to look like a team that was going to step into a playoff role. You predicted it yourself. You put this team
Yeah.
over a lot of quality and not so quality
It's
camps
true.
in the American League race. So we believed in it enough. They haven't believed in it enough. Their coaching staff and their ownership are spinning.
Hmm.
I think we're watching a burning like bandwagon right at the moment, and the fortunately, instead of it being burned down this year like we thought was going to be the case, they may just prolong the pain. So keep an eye on Toronto. If they really try to double down on building yet again around this team, I think we've seen the script enough. I think we really have. So I think they're going insane. I'll
Yep.
repeat it because it sounds great at the end of this discussion about Toronto. Just sounds, I get goosebumps. Toronto's going insane. Poor Canadians. I'm so sorry. Hey, the back half of the countdown is nigh down. Number 14 marks our descent into the better teams in baseball right now. Who's got the performance that raised your eyebrows most next?
Well, I'm not gonna keep you waiting anymore on this one, Warren. It's gonna be the Pittsburgh Pirates. I
Sure.
think this is a good place
Yeah.
for them, right around the middle. They had a 5-5 week. They're sitting at 45 and 48, pretty close to 500. They started off the
Yep.
week with a 3-game series against St. Louis. They only took one out of those three. Then a 4-game series against the Mets, which they split 2-2. Yes, we did lose against Skeens, Warren. And then
Yep.
a 3-game series against Milwaukee, where they took 2 out of 3. So they ended the week on a high note by winning 3 out of their final 4 games. Big news, obviously. Skeens not only made the roster, he will be the starting pitcher for the National League after having two starts, Warren, out of his first 11, where he went no hit through 7+ innings. No one has done that ever. Nolan Ryan did it once, Warren. No one has done it twice. It's his rookie year. So just unreal. The Pittsburgh Skeens, they've been fantastic. The other thing I wanted to note, though, is
Pittsburgh
the
Skeens. I
Pittsburgh
love it.
Skeens, dude. Absolutely. In the series, I saw the Pirates play the Mets. You won't be surprised to hear it. Brian Reynolds. Oh,
Yes.
man. He was on a crazy hit streak. I think he was 8 for 10 in the series. Uh, he had timely home runs. He had unreal defensive plays. I'll be honest, Warren. I've known been a good player for a few years now. He in the outfield, he should have a Gold Glove with some of the plays I saw him making in left field. I was very impressed. In addition to the way he was batting, looking at this team, I'm still just like, man, you can move McCutcheon out of here because let's be honest, he hasn't been able to do what he does. I see like the old Starwoods of O'Neal Cruz and Cabrian Hayes like still very much this main focal point, but guys like
Don't forget Connor Joe,
but
Jack
yes, that's
Zielinski,
what I was getting at.
Jared
These other
Jared
guys,
Triolo.
these are the ones making it up.
Yo.
Even old Rowdy Telez, Warren, coming up with big plays at first base. Are you kidding me? Like, dude's a better defender than Pete Alonso at first. They have been having contributions up and down the lineup. So, even though like we were talking about, I don't think they're going to be aggressive at the deadline. I do think it's a really tough division and wild card in the National League. I don't think they're going to get there by the end of it. Love to see how competitive they are in the meantime. I also love that they're not ruining Skeens. I see people getting really upset that he's not getting complete game shutouts and no hitters. No, no, stop him at 90. Look at all of the pitchers right now who are sitting on the sideline with a torn UCL. Your Spencer Striders, you're all these young guys who come up and get hurt instantly. Like this guy's throwing 109 miles per hour. Stop him at 90 pitches. There is no. If you can't win the game after that, you're not going to, right? Like, I'm
Right.
glad they're handling him the right way. Just don't trade him.
Yo, the optimism in Bucko land is precisely why I couldn't put this team before Toronto. You know what I mean? Like everybody's eyes are on Pittsburgh because of Skeens right now, and you cannot overstate how cool that is to say in 2024
Yeah.
after how long Pittsburgh has been a competitive afterthought, you know? I love what's in the water for this team. I do have that bold prediction still on the table that this team can be considered for playoff contention going into September. And so far, dude, whether we like it or not, it's coming true.
They're there.
Um, they're there, man, and there is buzz around this team unlike there has been in years, and I love it. Brian Reynolds absolutely is popping off at the right time to prove that this isn't just a flash in the pan. Guys like Jared Triolo, as I was hinting at, Jack Solinsky, you said himself, Rowdy Telez is a crowd favorite right now. Andrew McCutcheon's a spiritual favorite. Like, they've got if Bednar can get healthy again, get back into this lineup, he was lowering that crazy ERA he ballooned at the beginning of the season. Like, they've got what they need to really surprise people right now, and the buzz is there, and that is the intangible that is most important in playoff time. So, again, goosebumps, dude. The National League Central is stacked and so exciting. Pittsburgh is in it, even if it is, as 4 games behind 500 right now, even if it is loosely, they are totally worthy to have a foot in the door. So
Yep.
watch these games.
Yes.
When, you might say. How? How can I watch the Pittsburgh Pirates play? Well, you can look forward to watching them make an example of the White Sox before the All-Star break. And then after the All-Star break, you get to see how good they really are against top-tier National League teams like Philadelphia and St. Louis. So this is the chance to see if there's really something going on in Pittsburgh or if it is just smoke on the horizon for these Pirates. But I love it. I'm excited. I'm grateful. And if I'm trading out my National League bandwagon team for sure right now at the midseason. It's not the very done Arizona Diamondbacks who we've yet to talk about today. Hello. It's actually the Pittsburgh Pirates. I just love seeing what they're doing right now.
Or
And
you're
if
just a
O'Neill
Toy
Cruz,
Story meme of Andy dropping the doll. I don't want to play with you anymore. The Arizona Diamondbacks picking up the
oh,
Pirates.
here's the thing, man. Especially if Seattle has that collapse that keeps them out of the playoffs, I need to be rooting for other storylines around the league, and that's how a baseball fan can stay happy. Come
And you're gonna pick the
September and
Pirates. That's like when I, Warren. That's like when I was a kid and I was sad the Jets didn't make the playoffs, and my dad was like, "Oh, just pick another team," and I was like, "Oh, okay, I like the Browns." And he was like,
Dan,
you pick another team."
listen, we don't like you don't understand. You know me, man. I can root for Baltimore. I can root for Minnesota. I can root for Kansas City. I can root for anybody who isn't the Astros, basically.
Sure.
So that's where my heart is at. I'm not saying Pittsburgh's my team if it's not Seattle, but I am saying I love it. I just love it.
How
Kudos
can
to
you not?
Pittsburgh. Enjoy your 14th spot and keep pitching lights out. Let's go. Keep surprising everybody. That's what I like to see. Number 13, lucky number 13,
Mm.
unlucky number 13. Could go a number of different ways for me. I need a team at this point that's still treading water. Maybe one that also kind of underwhelmed when you look at who stacked up against them this week. And when I think of those barometers, I think it's a fair place for me to throw my American League Central pick, the Cleveland Guardians, out at this spot. And I know you all are probably pretty surprised because most pundits have this as a top 5 team in the league week in and week out. And truthfully, punch by punch, I probably agree with them. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, our show is about the weekly trends. And Cleveland Guardians in these last 10 games went 5 for 5. 5 and 5, excuse me. They're now 57 and 35, easily still, again, 22 games over 500. Nobody's doubting their playoff credentials. But there is something about the pitching that continues to scare us. There is a reality where they could lose enough ground by playoffs that they don't carry the right momentum in there unless their offense buoys them, much like Milwaukee. They're very similar to Milwaukee in that stance where, like, if Jose Ramirez and Steven Kwan and their combination of guys like Will Brennan or, the Naylor brothers, of course, or the incomparable David Fry, if those guys are helping them out, they'll be okay. But if the offense sags, there's not a whole lot outside the bullpen that's got me compelled about their pitching, and we talk about that a lot. So this was a week where just that storyline, that fear, did manifest. They did take 2 of 3 predictably from Chicago White Sox. You can't take too much from that. They did take 2 of 3 relatively predictably from the San Francisco Giants, and that barely gives us a thumbs up here. The scary part right now is that they lost 3 of 4 to Detroit. What? That's not good. How did that happen? And Dan, some of these, buddy, are, close losses, the 0-1, the 4-5, but the last one, a 1-10 schlubbing at the hands of Detroit,
Yeah.
that shows that there's something changing a little bit, maybe, just maybe, out in the AL Central. Okay, Dan, I set it up. What do you feel about Cleveland and the results that we just weighed in on from this week's work?
I don't think they had a really stiff competition this past week. And I think that we've seen this team do really well against really strong teams. But those are usually situations where the offense kind of takes over. I think the rotation is one deep. And at this point, like, they're not too worried about the division title. They've secure enough in that. I think the Twins and Royals will probably be fighting over second place for the rest of the way. That could totally change. I think that they're pretty safe for the playoffs, though. But you need to make a move for your rotation because you're right. The bullpen has not just been great, Warren. It's been the best in baseball. I mean, your stretch 7-8 guys, your closer, like everybody, Emmanuel Clase in the closer role especially, but Scott Barlow, Cade Smith have numbers at a top in the league right now and have posted a couple saves themselves. But behind Tanner Beatty, you don't have anybody. I think of Zach Eflin as one of those names. Mm-hmm. I think of the Eric Feedy as well, possibly going over here. But I don't see there's as many starting pitchers available as we do have like position players, which I don't think the Guardians are in.
Right.
On. I feel like the Guardians could make a really good run with a couple more pitchers. I just wonder if there's a market out there for that. Because if there's not, man, I'd be really scared as this team going into a playoff game where we've seen it before, Warren, these great, powerful offensive teams, they could put a few runs on the board, but they just get outslugged because they don't have the pitching. And as good as the Guardians are, that's the story I'm getting from this team.
And I'm with you. I think word for word, we could write it very similarly. I want to throw out there this notion that I think it's rare that trade deadline trades reward to potentially playoff bound teams in a way like I think there could be if Seattle trades Brian Wu or I like Brian Wu for this. I really do, to Cleveland to give them a little bit more of a flamethrower in a role that, Brian doesn't pitch 7 innings. But if he does, it's like an anomaly and something to celebrate. And I think Cleveland could benefit from a guy like Brian Wu. Yeah. And we could grab from them maybe that Will Brennan I keep talking about. Maybe that David Fry I don't mind. Maybe some of those role players, like none of the star studs, but some of those role players, like that could be a win-win for both teams, in my humble opinion. And that's the kind of thing I think about for Cleveland. I love the idea of them getting a Fetty, but you're totally right. There's not a lot of quality arms in this trade deadline pool, really, because a lot of these teams keep saying, "Yeah, we'll float you guys this guy." Nope, we're just kidding. We still want to keep our pieces. Look at Toronto, for example.
The Mets too. Severino and Manaea were on the market, but now all of a sudden the Mets are wanting to stay in it. So you're right. A lot of teams are flip flopping.
And the truth is like, this has been an incredibly painful year injury-wise for arms. That's really where arms are a premium. They truly and completely are. So it could be tough. It could be a tough scenario where Cleveland actually surprises us by giving up a lot of ground as we approach the playoffs. I worry for them that they'll burst a lot of the momentum bubble and then struggle in postseason play because all their pitching will be exposed and exhausted.
They're like the American League Milwaukee almost, Warren, would you say?
I think I did say that, and I love that.
That's why.
Hearts. Just a little bit. Yeah, because both of them rely so heavily on the offenses to keep their concerning pitching afloat, and yet both of them are succeeding so well
And
right
leading their
now.
divisions.
Ooh, I can't wait for the next time those teams link up in a series now.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to check the calendar for that. Is it this week, Warren wonders out loud as he pulls up the schedule for Cleveland? Nah. First, they've got 3 against Tampa Bay before the All-Star break, and then they've got 3 versus San Diego to greet them afterwards, so that should be a fun matchup. And then they get 4 more chances at Detroit, and we'll find out where Detroit stands once again against the divisional leaders. That's actually one you should circle too, guys, if you don't mind me saying, because Detroit did just take 3 or 4 from them, and that's not necessarily a fluke, even though it seems like it could be. All right, number 13 is out of the way, and Cleveland falls into the background. You, sir, have the choice for number 12, and I can't help but wonder who you'll shoot at next.
So yeah, number 12 getting into the upper half. So we have a few good teams in here. I think continuing to rise, you won't be surprised, Warren. It's going to be the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah,
Yeah, a positive
I agree.
week. 5-4. They started it off taking 2 out of 3 against Pittsburgh and then 3 out of 4 against Washington. But they lost a doubleheader we already talked about, 2 games to Kansas
Mm-hmm.
City. Lost both of those to bring them to 5-4 on the week, but their resurgence continues in a division where their opponents are still struggling. The Cards are 5 games back at this point. Nolan Arenado, gotta say, Warren is really kicking it into gear recently. Couple more homers for him. Alec Burleson's the other name who's been doing fantastic of late,
Yes.
leading the team. Oh, I'm sorry. He's second on the team with 15 home runs to Gorman's 17. But we have these other names popping up just like we knew they would. And I'm not going to bore you again, Warren, with how good Lance Lynn is doing. I know you know. But I know one of your favorite players, Lars Nootbaar, is back with
Yeah.
the team. And that's a little bit of a offensive piece that they were lacking out of the outfield. So rounds them out a little bit more as they head into the All-Star game. Cards are still on that upward trajectory. It was a rough start, no doubt, but they really
Yeah.
are putting it together. I think, Ryan Helsley's an All-Star, great closer for them, and they could use a little bit of help in the bullpen if they want it. But, other than that, I think the Cards are really on a good trajectory right now, Warren. I still think they'll catch up to the Brewers. I think they're going to do it. I think that the division is in the Cards for St. Louis.
Ah,
Yeah.
look at you. That took us, what, 19 shows to bust out that
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, it
Good
took a
for
while.
Dude, we really hold on to that pun for a bit. I'm proud of us. So, okay, Dan, kudos to you. I'm just going to say it. Like, this is truly proving to be the exact type of St. Louis Cardinals team you thought they would be when we opened up the season talking about which of these veteran teams would find their legs and stabilize enough to rise above others. We still couldn't have banked on Milwaukee being what they've been. So we're watching St. Louis truly run the path we expected against the team we didn't. So as they get ready to come back from the All-Star break, though, this could be an opportunity to really figure out how real they are, because first they get 4 games against the Cubs, who are coming off a hot streak. You notice we haven't talked about the Cubs yet this week. Then after the All-Star break, they get Atlanta, perennially one of the better teams in the National League, of course, and then 3 against Pittsburgh, who, again, we just got done talking about them for 10 minutes because it's exciting to talk about them. So this is a huge clip of games for these Cardinals to show how real they really are, and you need Nolan Arenado to do what he's doing. You need Lars Nootbaar to come back healthy. You need Mason Wynn to continue to put, my foot in my mouth for not talking him up earlier on in the year. And you need Alec Burleson to be that guy. You need Nolan Gorman to swing. The list goes on and on. Everything, though, is kind of meshing. One name I don't think we've brought up in a couple weeks that I need to apologize for not discussing because I didn't realize he was back already is Wilson Contreras, who
Yes.
had that tragic arm break, a couple months ago. I honestly felt like that time flew that he was gone. And when I tuned in to watch a St. Louis Cardinals game earlier this week, I was pleasantly surprised to watch him step into the batter's box and have a gritty at bat like you would expect a Wilson Contreras to have.
He did the
So
gritty.
he did the gritty. Yeah, I'm not going to do that while sitting down. It's
It'd be
not
tough.
physically possible. I feel like this is not working. Okay. Um 110% though, this is the team you warned they would be, and kudos to the arms that are helping them get to this place. I respect your choice, Dan, and I'm having fun cheering for a St. Louis Cardinals fan base that's re-inspired in their crew. So it's a good story. Will it continue? The truth is that as strong as this looks like it could continue, Dan, the entire division is up for grabs. We've
Yep.
talked about how no one is safe in the NL Central. So keep watching that division every chance you get, guys. It's the hottest and most interesting to call in baseball, in my humble opinion. Let's move away from St. Louis, call it a day for the Redbirds, and check out what's going on with number 11 just outside of the top 10. And it's always tough to shoot at a team at this stage, especially one that's as good as this team is. But the truth is, at 5-5, they're the last of the truly mediocre teams this week before we get into our winners. So, Atlanta, it's time for you to come out and play again on the outside looking in on the top 10. Dan, this is exactly where Atlanta was last time we spoke, which is kind of a fun pattern we don't usually point out. Where did we put teams in our last countdown? Because it's usually so fluid. Well, Atlanta stays pat after going literally 5-5 and treading that water, as I like to say this week. They dropped 2 of 3 to the Giants. Truly a nasty look there. Not a fan of that. And then they do win 2 of 3 against the Philadelphia Phillies. So they were more prepared to take on a strong National League contender. More prepared than the Dodgers were anyway. So there's that. And then they split 4 against the Diamondbacks to cap it all off. So again, a week of mediocrity for the Atlanta Braves, but I would almost call that encouraging regardless. They're 10 games over 500. They have a plus 61 run differential. They're still dangerous, but they're otherwise in the same that they've been in for the last stand, where we've encouraged them to find these trades and get moving. So I talked about how Brent Rooker is my pick to be the big name they pick up, at least on the position player side. What else do you think Atlanta needs to do to make sure they're in the hunt come playoff time?
Well, Warren, they may have done it already because they picked up the recently DFA'd Eddie Rosario. Remember him?
Yeah.
NLCS MVP and World Series
Yeah.
champion just 3 years ago? Yeah, he's back with the team. Do not be surprised to see all that momentum come back. That was another free agent that Washington cut that we didn't mention, by the way. Eddie Rosario just cut him for nothing, and he goes back to
Right.
Atlanta,
Yep.
his glory
Yep.
years. Outside of that,
Yep.
Warren, like the offense, the names are there, just the numbers haven't been there. A team like this, you gotta work towards them rebounding. You know, it's not as easy to just plug and play as much with the amount of roster moves that they've made. The pitching rotation has been great. Right now, we have Spencer Schwellenbach filling in that fifth starting role, he's been doing really, really well. And this is all in the meantime. We got Ian Anderson and Bryce Elder both working on their comebacks. They're going to be rejoining the team soon. So I really think that Atlanta's just the offensive breakout away. You know, we're still confident in saying that they have the talent on the team. These are some extended
Right.
slumps. Maybe some of these guys don't break out of these slumps, you know? I mean, it's worth noting that both catchers, Darno and Murphy, have batting averages below 230. Orlando Arcia is the starting shortstop right now. He's hitting 208. We've got like Marcell Ozuna obviously has been, stepping it up, but we've talked about their struggles in the outfield. Adam Duvall's a starting outfielder for them still, even with Rosario on the roster, and he's hitting 184. So,
Mm-hmm.
again, you could add a Rooker type. I wouldn't be surprised to
Yeah.
see if Atlanta is more focused on getting some rebounds from these teams. But we'll see. We'll see. This is still a playoff team. Warren is one of those teams that they have all the power on the both sides of the ball, kind of like Philly. I think the last couple of years, I could see them just hitting a cold stretch in the playoffs where it matters most and coming up short. And the pitching is as good as it is not going to bail out this slumping offense.
I'm gonna say guys like Jared Kelnick and Ramon Laureano are probably some of the brighter spots in the offense, both sitting over 250 and batting average. Guys who those are the kind of guys that need to be more than consistent to keep raising the bar here.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
Laureano just got hurt too.
he just has such bad luck, right? What
Yeah.
bad luck for Ramon. Michael Harris too. Michael Harris the second, excuse me.
Yeah, he's hurt too. Another one.
Yeah, yeah. So, here's a fun thing that I'll say about this team. We've talked in the past about the broadcasting that I thought was so atrocious. Watching Chipper Jones and the boys sit around and just kind of make fun of each other for an entire game.
Yeah.
It's kind of how I feel like Atlanta built their team at this point. Like the boys just sitting around making jokes and feeling good about stuff, and they're just going to mess around and get to the playoffs. But
Yeah.
that may not happen. You may not have that luxury after all. You're only 10 games above 500, and while there are a lot of teams looking to get into your spot, that's the point. There are a lot of teams looking to get into your spot. So
Right.
shore up these holes and hope that the veterans you're bringing in don't go the way of Adam Duvall, another guy you had on that 2020 or 2021 World Series run with Eddie Rosario. Like Eddie Rosario can just get on this team and start missing balls too.
True.
But Dan, they made the move. They made the move you called, right? You said Ronald Acuna went down in 2021, and they went and made all these moves. Eddie Rosario was among those.
Yep.
They did it again this year, just like you said they would.
Hmm.
Literally the same guy though, and you have to wonder, is that where they stop? I don't think it's enough. They need to do more.
Right.
All eyes are on Atlanta as many eyes are on Atlanta to make sure that they're going to be what they've been described as destined to be, and that is a playoff contender in 2024 and a darn strong one. Right now, it's not. It's still like they're treading water at best. For the last several weeks, we haven't seen them really break into our top five in a while. So
And the
they
division
need to
might be
put it
gone
together.
at this point. They're 9.5 games back.
Mm-hmm.
And with the quality of the Phillies and the Braves, I don't see them closing that gap. They can get closer, but I don't see them making up 10 games and passing the Phillies. Because even with the injuries, there was one point where the Phillies were down Turner, Schwarber, and Harper, and they were still winning more games than the Braves. So I think we could say at this point the division might be gone for Atlanta.
Amen. I hope you Atlanta fans are listening to that. You may be outside the top 10, but your chances of going to the playoffs are, they're slipping a tad, just a tad. So let's see what you guys do to respond to that. We're in our top 10, Dan. All these teams are strong enough this week. Some new names busting into the top 10, some we've seen before. This is an interesting blend of teams. Who do you want to put into the 10th spot and acknowledge first?
I think first up, off a really good week, we're going to have to say the Chicago Cubs, Warren.
Ooh, an interesting choice to go this early in the top 10. Okay, understood. Welcome back to the green side of things, Cubbies. You did have a good week. Break it down, Dan.
Yeah, 6-3 week. They started things off a little bit rough. Took 1 out of 3 against the Phillies. I mean, that's a tough opponent. And they took 2 out of 3 against the Angels. That should be expected. But then they topped it off with 3 wins against Baltimore, a sweep in Baltimore. Very impressive. That
Wow.
definitely
Mm-hmm.
deserves them being in the top 10. And, Ian Happ has been doing really well in this nice little stretch recently. Michael Busch has been kicking off, a couple extra homers in there too. But Cody Bellinger is not, Warren, and he just broke his middle finger on a hit by pitch. Not sure if you
Oh,
saw that. It's kind of
no.
nasty, and he might not even be ready to come back until right before the deadline. So, the Cubs were one of those teams kind of on the edge, a little bit too far back, but maybe they're not. The youth has been pretty good when they have had a lot of injuries. So there was some thought that they could be buyers, they could be sellers, just move on from Bellinger maybe since he's underperforming. But this pretty much takes Bellinger out. A team could take a chance and still trade for Bellinger. At this point, it's just very unlikely with his performance so far up until this year, and now he's going to be coming back from a broken finger. So I think you're going to see Chicago unable to move many pieces, probably not willing to pay the price to buy a lot of other pieces. Shota Imanaga has still been good, but you're not necessarily going to build out the rest of your rotation when you still have Steele and Hendricks and Tyon working their way back to relevancy. So,
Mm-hmm.
yes, Chicago's had a really good week, and I feel like it was a spike. We've seen a few of their spikes. I think overall that the ceiling of this team is not far off of what we've seen from their performance this past week. I would love to see them prove me wrong and go out there and sustain it behind some great starting pitching. But yeah, I think Chicago is unfortunately going to be the outside of this NL wild card bubble, and I think they would be good to just commit to that over the next little bit and not get stuck on a contract like Bellinger and a few others in the form of like even a Dansby Swanson or an Ian Happ who you might lose for nothing. Get something good and run it back next year. You still got Suzuki. You have another year of Imanaga and Steele. Run it back.
Wow. So we're calling them sellers a little bit,
A little
saying that
bit.
it's over. Well
Yeah.
done for the Cubs. I picked this team to be the National League Central stalwarts who were able to figure it out enough and win the division. And they do look at this point to be heading just slightly, actually, in a strong direction. Really, this week they did go 6-3, right? They did have a good week.
Yeah.
They showed that they can beat some teams, including a sweep of Baltimore that is just not easy to do. They're the first team to sweep Baltimore in Baltimore since 2021. So listen, I know the long term of this team looks shaky and questionable, and you're definitely bummed to see Cody Bellinger break his finger in a way that takes him potentially out of consideration to be an impact player for anybody for the rest of the season. Like, I get it, Dan, that your Cardinals pick looks strong and you're having a little bit of fun blowing some ice onto my pick, but I don't know if we're that level of severity yet from my perspective. I think Chicago fans are closer to your side, though. I think there's a lot of disenfranchised expectations from this year that just aren't being met. Um, but I'm gonna go ahead and take the path of like the Toronto Blue Jays strategy you've been having the last couple of weeks, where when I say they're done and you go, nah, I want to see them sell first.
Hmm.
I want to see them sell first, Dan, before I
Okay.
say they're done.
That's fair.
But let's see if this week is the one that puts the nails in the coffin first. It's them and the Cardinals. 4 games. Interesting. Watch that. Like all other National League Central teams, everybody's still in the race right now. Watch that 4 game set. Then the All-Star game happens, and after that, we'll have Arizona and Milwaukee. More divisional matchups for Chicago to tell us where they're at. So I would like to say I'll have my eye on them extra carefully the next clip of 10 games, Dan. And in 2 weeks when we record on the 25th or 26th, I'll tell you once and for all if I agree that Chicago is dead
All
in the
right.
water. But
I'm looking forward to it.
dude, the ice is thin. I get it. The ice is thin. I just have so much belief in so many aspects of what they can be, but I know the Cody Bellinger hit is a real one. So, it should be an interesting next 10 days for the Chicago Cubs. Number 9, keeping it odd, I will have to grab a team here that I think is certainly worthy of acknowledgement. They've needed a little bit of a rub for several weeks and finally had a really strong week. And they're in my division, so I have to say I've had more eyes on them than others. How about our world champion Texas Rangers? Checking in with a 6-3 week. They take the 9th spot in a comfortable fashion after some pretty impressive series wins, but also some concerning losses. Let's talk about it. They first lost 2 of 3 to the San Diego Padres, who have been a little floundery this week. We talked about them a long time ago today. And then they sweep the Tampa Bay Rays in what was legitimately surprising, only because both these teams look mediocre enough that nobody seemed like they could sweep the other, if you don't mind me saying. And then the Angels, a divisional rival, gave up 2 of 3 to them. So I think strength of schedule comes into play as to why I can't justify them being much higher here, but they had a good week and they really needed it. They're now 44-49. At one point, by the way, winning 5 games in a row to really kind of make that record look a lot better from the last time we spoke. And you have to expect that, at least that's encouraging. Is it sustainable? It's doubtful. This does feel like a Tampa Bay kind of team or a Detroit kind of team in an American League race that doesn't feel, welcome of those kinds of teams making it into the playoffs this year. But they deserve to be talked about in the upper echelon based off of record alone. How do you feel, Dan?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It was a good week for Texas, and I think the rest of the way their schedule's a bit easier than it was the first half. Plus, hopefully, some names coming back from injury. I mean, I know we say it every week, Warren, but I still
Yeah.
think that there is a ceiling for this Texas team that hopefully we'll see. And, the fight for the division might be out of reach, but I don't think the wild card is just yet. I'm curious to see how they'll react after the All Star break. Speaking of which, obviously Marcus Semien made it in. He's starting now for the
Yep.
American League. I was
Yep.
a little disappointed. Corey Seager is my snub from the Rangers, Warren. He didn't have a hot
Hmm.
start to the year, but he rebounded really well. And he's brought back the power. He's leading the team in home runs. He's up there for in terms of average and his slugging as well. Plus, obviously, that Corey Seager defense. So, not to say Simeon isn't deserving. I do think Seager was good enough to be on this team, though, especially as, I mean, sure, you got your Gunnar Hendersons and your Bobby Witt Juniors taking all the spotlights, those young, hot American League shortstops. But even as a
Ooh.
reserve, come on, Corey Seager should be in the mix, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. With a 2.9 WAR, I mean that's going to be tops or near the tops of the American League, and it does lead Marcus Simeon's, and they play similar roles in the infield. So it does feel as if like it had to be one or the other. Bit controversial that Marcus Simeon gets the nod when so many of the numbers actually favor Sager. So maybe it's the consistency of being on the field. I think Sager had a couple more injury issues than Marcus Simeon has, and Simeon's been more of the heat pump, but that's just me speculating. I haven't checked some numbers to look at that. But yeah, this is a Texas team that I still feel is pretty mediocre, and they do have a couple stars making it look good. The injuries coming back, will it help? We don't know. They're already pointing out that Max Scherzer's contract isn't getting any buzz in trade talks, so
I think he
this
needs to
feels
approve it too, because he has a no trade clause, so he'd have to approve it. And I don't think he wants to go anywhere. He's moved the last few years, so
yeah. I don't know. This seems like a team, like I said, amongst the Detroit and Tampa Bay fabric that is too busy still asking questions at this stage of the season to be ready to answer them come playoff time. So it's going to be a very interesting second half for them. If they get good enough to make the playoffs, it's going to be a meteoric rise, and
right, like
well, it
last
could
year.
happen. You're right. You got it. It could happen. They're kind of like the Arizona Diamondbacks that way. When you think about it, you could easily call this team done based off of the play they've put on the field this point. So, yikes. There they are. Will they stay there? This next week is going to tell us a lot about how the Rangers really feel. They're going to end their run towards the All Star break with 3 games against Houston. We all know how that could projectively go. And then after the All Star game, we've got Baltimore and the Chicago White Sox, a tale of two projections there. You have to expect one team to trounce them and the other to give up some decent wins. So Texas could be coming out around the mid, I would say, again next week. We'll see if they do any better or worse. It could tell us a lot about who they'll be come playoff time at this stage too. So we'll leave Texas there. The world champs are floundering a tad, at least overall, despite a good week. Anybody else amongst our top 8, Dan, floundering a little despite a good week? I think you can point to a couple teams when I set it up that way. Who's number 8?
This is a weird one, Warren. For me, it's going to be the Cincinnati Reds, and it's just because of such an
Ooh.
all over the place week. They went 6-4, so it was a good week. Started off
Yeah.
with a 3-game sweep of the Yankees. We've talked about the Yankee struggles, but we've also talked
Well,
about how they're mostly healthy, so kind of surprising. Really good
yep.
showing by the Reds. They followed it up by getting swept by Detroit, Warren, who, I
Yeah.
mean, we'll talk about them too. But then they
Yep.
finished off the week with taking 3 out of 4 against Colorado. 3 out of 4 is pretty good. Can't ask for a whole lot more than that, except that maybe that fourth game or one win in Detroit, right? So the Reds rebounding pretty well. They've had injuries recently. They got TJ Martini and Stuart Fairchild, a bunch of outfielders hurt, which is why they traded for Austin Slater from San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Good little bit of depth for
Mm-hmm.
them. He's been hitting okay, and that's kind of all they need right now. Reese Hines also
Yep.
debuted, another young player with a moonshot and a double in his first game. Warren, so Cincinnati still has youth coming through the pipeline. And the last thing I wanted to note is obviously like Ellie De La Cruz in the All Star game as a as a substitute. Totally deserving, makes perfect sense. But I don't know how you don't put Spencer Steer on this team. To me,
Yeah.
he has been consistent this whole year as the life of the offense. Ellie's done great. He's been like not perfect defensively though, and obviously he steals a lot of bags, but it's not like he has 100% get rate either with those. But Spencer Steer across the board, he's been good in the outfield. He's ranking towards the top on the team in average, in home runs. I mean, he's second on the team behind Ellie in stolen bases. So I understand why he's not, but I feel it's a little bit of disrespect from Spencer Steer, Warren.
Well, we're not too far from Chicago, in Cincinnati, and I bring up that comparison because it stinks to be the Scottie Pippen of the team sometimes.
Right.
You get overlooked. Yes, I'm blending basketball references from 20 or 30 years ago into this, but it's true. It stinks when you're the second best player sometimes when the star is Ellie De La Cruz or Michael Jordan, et cetera, right? So you come out looking like the ugly stepchild when honestly you might just be the steak to the sizzle of the team. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? So I'm amazed with how flexible this Cincinnati team is. They just keep adding elements that they can use to counterpunch their teams. And we talked about how they were a Swiss Army knife coming into the year. They just continue to be that. And that's why you do see the rises and the falls. They just keep on experimenting with which lineups and which strategies are going to go against which teams, and they don't really settle in and decide, here's who we are. And that is going to leave everybody guessing every time they play the Reds, and that is going to make it really interesting to see if they're one of the weirdos who's going to win the National League Central.
Right.
Again, the most exciting division in baseball. I just love how Cincinnati remains so fluid and adaptable. They're such good improvisers, really, in the baseball world at this moment, and they're going to do everything they can to put the right pieces on the field to sneak into these playoffs. And it's true because they're making moves. That's what they're quietly saying. We are not going to go away. We are going to win as many games as we can this year, and it's a cool place for Cincinnati to be in when at the beginning of the year when like knee to waist deep in a rebuild, right?
Yeah.
So
Now
they
they're a
believe in
couple years from.
themselves.
Sorry, they're a couple years away from running the division at this point. Now, I've coming from that, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think there's a real chance. However, we're saying the same about literally every other
True.
team in the division right
True.
now.
True. I will say though,
So,
Warren, that I feel like it's probably Cincinnati and Pittsburgh as far as young prospects. If you want to project out
yeah,
3 years from now, to me, those
yeah,
two that stand out. It'd be great to see them instead of the Cardinals and the Brewers at the top of the division. That'd be great.
maybe. But St. Louis has Nolan Gorman. He'll be a cornerstone for a while, as will Mason Wynn, and
Well,
then
yeah, but
Milwaukee's got William Contreras and Jackson Churio
true.
and Bryce Terrain. So the future is so bright for all of the National League Central, except the Cubs probably. So,
Yeah.
all right then. Let's continue on into today's countdown as we start circling the best and brightest, bar none. The seventh team of the league. I think I've hinted at them enough today. Let's get them out of the way for the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Yeah.
What? They continue to play baseball that matters, and they continue to hit right around the 500 mark. That's where they are at this stage of the season. Still a 500 team. Who'd have thought it? They really are invisible. They so very much are. They remind me of the Rays in this instance, and yet they're sitting here at 500, and they went 6-4 this week, 2 steps forward. They got series wins over the Dodgers and the Padres, the teams that are leading them in their division. And then they split 2 against Atlanta, winning the back 2, by the way. They first dropped the first 2 pretty convincingly and then won the back 2, which I think is a clear indicator that Arizona is still thinking on their feet and they're still capable of counterpunching the teams that are perceived to be better than them. Dan, you said Arizona is done like in week 4 of our coverage this year. It was amazing to me. Are you worried yet that you were dead wrong? They're right here in the race.
I'm not worried at all. You're right. They are right in the race for sure. And, we've seen Corbin Carroll kind of try and turn it around a little bit. Obviously, Ketel Marte earned his all-star start. I was going to say my snubs from this team, I actually got two, were in Christian Walker and Gurriel Jr. not being on the all-star is crazy. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm not too worried about it. Paul Sewald has been like the main part of their bullpen. He's blown two consecutive saves. That hasn't happened ever before in his career. Doesn't mean it'll happen again. Just that's kind of the last line of defense they have. If that's not doing well, the bullpen's not doing well. And
That's true.
unfortunately, we haven't seen the improvement from the rotation that we would have wanted to. Zach Gallen has been relatively pedestrian, still one of their better pitchers, but that's really been lagging behind on them. I don't see any of that as a position of strength. We've talked about there being less on the market in terms of pitching out there, and I think that's what Arizona needs. And I just, between Merrill Kelly and Jordan Montgomery, Eduardo Rodriguez, all nursing injuries, I don't think Arizona's going to be able to put it all together. And I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that I'm wrong. Don't get me wrong when I say, they had good play this week. They had great offensive performances. They gave up a lot of runs in a lot of those games, though, Warren, and I'm not confident
Yeah.
that this Arizona team will outslug every other team they go up against. So I'm still not ready to say that they're back in it. I still think they're done. I'm curious to see what they'll do at the deadline. I'm curious to see if they'll do anything. What do you think, Warren? Are they going to buy at the deadline? Would that be
I
responsible?
I don't know. There's been buzz around the idea of a Seawald in Seattle reunion, and I would take him near the back of our bullpen. I'm not saying he's our closer,
Sure.
but I would say it'd be fun to have him back to bolster a Gregory Santos, Ryan Stanek, and Andres Munoz dragon at this point. But I would want to give up, future prospects, which of course the Mariners have 8 in the top 100. I'm getting a little fixated here, but I think it's a very interesting thing that I want to say to you, Dan, that this time last year, if we were doing this show, I think you would have said the same thing about these Arizona Diamondbacks at the stage of 2023 that we were
Maybe.
at last year. So it's a it's an interesting thing
And
to
the
see a
Rangers.
team that, right, you can write this team off if you choose to, but you may be pretty bold to do so. I will say Eugenio Suarez, I think, got two pretty key home runs in the coverage that I
Yeah.
was watching to say that he's figuring it out as the weather's heated up a tad. I'm not saying I miss him in Seattle enough to say I wish we still had him, but he's the kind of piece that needs to get going if this team is going to, turn the corner into true contender. But they're just like the Rays. And if I'm floundering to figure them out, I have to say the same about Arizona. I just challenge you to think, hey, this is kind of where they were last year. And they were the National League champions when all was said and done. So
It's true.
I give it another 10 days. I give it till July 25th or 26th when we record next. This will be another team like the Cubs that I'll have a bit more to weigh in on after this clip.
All right, we'll see.
Let's take a. I agree. It's really hard for me to call. First, they get another team right on the ropes with Toronto, then the All Star break, and then 3 games against the Cubs. It's perfect booking, right? You can't write this storyline better for the Cubs and the Arizona Diamondbacks to be matched up coming out of the All Star break. And then after that, they get the Kansas City Royals, another great litmus test of the seriousness of these Diamondbacks at this point. A lot can happen. A very much lot can happen. I don't. I don't know if they buy a ton. I don't know if they sell a ton. I don't know if Arizona knows who they are. That's really true. So it's exactly
True.
like Tampa for me. I need 10 more days, Dan.
All right.
Ugh. All right.
So do they.
So yeah. That's might be all they have left. 6 games or 6 teams left. We've hit our risers, guys. All 6 teams left here
Yes.
are strong report cards over the week, and some of them are surprising for sure. Who do you got at number 6, Dan, in this Russian roulette of aptitude?
Yeah, I got one that's not surprising. It's the Phillies, Warren. Maybe you've heard of them.
Yeah.
Little team out of Pennsylvania. No
Yep.
big deal. It's just number one in team starting pitching ERA, number three in team relief pitching ERA, number three in team hitting average. Top five in every statistical offensive category except home runs, where there's six. I think you get the idea.
Wow.
Warren, Schwarber and Harper were out when Turner came back in. Didn't matter. Phillies did great. They returned this past week which led them to sweeping the Dodgers. So they're kind of on top of the world right now. Those drops against Atlanta, those are divisional matchups. Of course, you want to say you'd like to see them win those games, but I think they already have the season series on Atlanta, so not a lot actually happened there. I mean, technically JT Realmuto is still injured, but outside of that, this team's in a pretty good place. Spencer Turnbull, I should say, is the other one. For me, Warren, Phillies, they're going to be a riser for probably most of the year. We saw their
Yep.
slump at the start of the year. I wouldn't, not going to freak out if we see one or two more slumps the rest of the year. Like you said, they're going to be aggressive, probably get another outfielder. And this is their division as far as we're looking at the rest of the season. They're going to be basically the litmus test for anybody that's curious of what the NL playoff picture is going to look like. Play the Phillies. That's your taste of the playoffs this year. That's what it's going to be to me.
And yep, I think the report card speaks for itself. I think you're absolutely right. They've been the team that has blown further in front of the entire division and the National League in a way that everybody would have wished their team did, right? Especially your Atlanteans and your Los Angeles Dodgers fans. It's incredible stuff to see how strong Philadelphia is. I'm gonna say Brandon Marsh is my sad all-star snub, of course. We talked about how excited I was to see him be near the top of considerations for the voting.
Yeah.
And I was stoked because I thought it was right there on the horizon for him to get a nod, and he was beat out by, Jackson Merrill and a couple of the other young guns in the National League pool, and I just think Brandon Marsh has done his time. But I like this team, and when I watch them, it's clear that they are playing with chemistry. They're playing like a family. You've got so many different approaches to how you can win the game, whether you're using speed with Trey Turner, or you're using overall contact with Alec Boehm, or you're using some impressive power with Kyle Schwarber or Trey Turner, right? Everybody can do what's needed to be done to win baseball games for Philadelphia, and it sounds like it's elementary, dear Watson, but this is maybe the only team where it kind of sort of is. They have the fewest weaknesses in my mind when I look up and down this team, and they know who they are, and they're running it in it's a cyclical thing. This is automatic for them. They're comfy and cozy. So run. Run from Philadelphia. The Phillies are going to break you in pieces like they did the Liberty Bell, okay? Yeah.
Yeah. Also,
Really.
they have four
That was a
aces, so good luck.
right,
Like they don't have a fifth starter
right.
with the injuries, but they don't need one. You won't get to 5 games against them in a series because they'll sweep you in 4 with Wheeler, Sanchez, Nola, and Suarez, and you'll be like, "What happened? How did we get no hit through 4 games?"
Dude, when your fourth guy is oh no, you said Sanchez. Sorry. Suarez. Ranger Suarez has had such a good year, and Wheeler, absolutely. You gotta love watching this team play. Uh, and in the postseason, those assassin arms are going to be extremely hard
Oh
to
yeah,
overcome, for sure. If they stay healthy, Philadelphia is already on the path of least resistance towards the World Series, which is why it's
yeah.
super surprising to have you put them at 6th overall. But I get it. When you look at the wins, they technically had the fewest out of everyone who's left on the board,
And when you
which is saying
lose,
something.
when you lose to the team chasing you, I know that they're not. We already talked about Atlanta's probably out of the division,
Yeah.
but that's still their main rival. That's still their barometer.
Yep. You got to make sure you're well above them for sure. So that was definitely a disappointment, and maybe the only thing that to take away from this week that wasn't positive for Philly overall. Now, the 5th spot for me is a tough bullet to shoot. Until I look at the win and loss records, it makes it very easy. This is the last team to have only 6 wins this week to their 3 losses. They're an American League stalwart and one of the, I think, overall most impressive teams when you rank how invisible they were to Dan and I when we started all of this up just 6 short months ago, or however it's long, Dan. I don't know. I'm talking about the Minnesota Twins. They get the 5th spot this week, 6-3. They got 2 out of 3 from Detroit, 2 out of 3 from Houston, 2 out of 3 from the White Sox. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, super straightforward week for the Twins. Despite the fact that they are one of our top 5 teams, I really don't have a laundry list of reasons to talk about why they're impressive. Dan, can you save me? tell me what's up with the Twins and why I get to put them at top 5.
I mean, no series losses. Their offense is top 5 in all categories except for stolen bases. That's the one area they struggle. But the guy leading the team in stolen bases is Willie Castro. And if you don't know Willie Castro's name, you will, because he's an all-star. And he's not a snub. He's a reserve. But I got to say, Warren, probably the most deserving all-star replacement that they've named. Because a lot of guys, we've said a lot of snubs. We have more ahead of guys who definitely deserve to be there. But Willie Castro, like, I don't want a single guy to take his spot on the roster. He's one of the only players on this team that has played every game this year, and he's
Wow.
played every position. We talked about all the injuries to the Twins. You know, shame on us for not talking about how Willie Castro has consistently been the guy playing outfield today, second base tomorrow, and freaking catcher next week. Like, he is doing whatever it takes, and he's done well offensively through all of that. A 268 average, slugging 430, 7 home runs. Like, really, really impressed with him. And I think that just speaks to the level of consistency we've seen despite the injuries, despite the maybe less than stellar rotation. It's just been a great, consistent team. So that has been reflected in the Twins' record this past week. They've now passed the Royals in the chase for the divisional lead. And I think that might go down to the wire, Warren. The Twins definitely still on the books for their divisional title.
It's amazing stuff that they were so invisible to us to the year, but
Right.
it's probably because we didn't expect a Willie Castro to be like this. We didn't expect a Jose Miranda to step up and contribute 2.6 WAR this year. Ryan Jeffers has been an impressive slugger for this team, 1.8. Royce Lewis, since coming back, sits around the 300 line in batting average, and Carlos Santana has contributed his sporadic slugging. Edward Julian also looks like a piece for their future. Even Trevor Larnach has checked in here or there and done some much, swings for this team. So everybody playing like a crew, everybody playing like a team, and it's working out for these Twins and doing so the best way you can with a balanced attack. A balanced attack that isn't hinging on a Byron Buxton, isn't hinging on a Royce Lewis, isn't relying on anybody. It's just everybody doing their part, and it's encouraging to see and makes us eat our hat a little bit. You talk about the rotation. I mean, Bailey Obear, Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan, a very strong trio of starters right
Never
here,
would have
man.
guessed Joe Ryan would be like basically the ace at the start of the year, Warren.
Mm-hmm. No, you can't. And he's contributed to WAR himself to lead the
He's been
pitching
great.
staff. It's not even close. Yeah. So lots to be encouraged by, and a team more impressive than we suspected. A really fun punchers duel between them and the Royals will determine second place position between them in this division, and maybe the sixth playoff piece, or the sixth wild card spot, maybe even fifth. I mean, we know how strong the American League race is right at the moment. Both are. I'm waffling a little bit, but what I am trying to say is that we definitely slept on Minnesota, and we had no right to. So
Right.
keep it up, boys, and kudos to a Willie Castro. Well played by the league to recognize a player who will do whatever it takes for his team to win. Oh gosh, I wish Cal Raleigh had that same treatment.
Can you tell?
I'm mad. But with that incredibly deft way of making it about Seattle to end the fifth spot, Dan, you have the spotlight for the fourth.
Yeah, man, and this is getting kind of tough. I gotta say, there's teams up here that haven't been up here, so pretty happy. I don't think you'll be so happy with some of them, but for this one, impressively, Warren, the Detroit Tigers are going to take our number 4 spot. Despite still being under 500, they had a great week. They went 7-3.
Yeah.
They they will they took 1 out of 3 against Minnesota, team we just talked about. They
Yep.
swept the Cincinnati Reds, who are also pretty high in our rankings. And then
Yep.
they took 3 out of 4 against Cleveland. So, really strong week for Detroit. I mean, obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously. Maybe you saw Javi Baez came off the IL, so really good addition
Hmm.
for them. Parker Meadows went on to the IL though, right then, so not exactly the best trade off of offensive abilities. But we've seen another young team. I get a lot of the same things we were talking about with the Royals. Probably needs a little bit of a break at this point. Great little momentum at the end here, but we'll probably use this All-Star break to rest and reset. Their pitching has been great, obviously led by All-Star Tarek Skubal and a resurging Jock Flaherty. Their pitching has been really good. They have several guys signed that they're given a good chance to. This is a team that you're probably not going to see them sell much of anybody at the deadline unless somebody wants Javi Baez. Warren, do you want Javi Baez on the team? No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. No.
It's exciting to see Detroit still staying in the mix. I wouldn't say that they're in. I mean, they are in a wild card mix, is the reality of it. I wouldn't say that they're likely to get there by the end of the season, but they're still competitive. They're not dropping off. They're not going to start selling, from what we can tell. They're definitely deserving to be up here this week, but I don't know if we'll see them up here again.
Yeah, I think the next 10 games determine if they do sell the veteran pieces anyway. That would be rentals, like a Gio Urshela type would be somebody that would signal the end of their effort. Maybe Mark Canha too. Those guys are the kinds that we would see move around, and I wouldn't sneeze at either one of those joining the Mariners squad, but you guys are probably used to me saying that about just about anybody. The Detroit Tigers for me this week, with the wins over Cincinnati and Cleveland, told me that they may just be figuring it out enough to try to make that mini push that sometimes an outside team does that surprises you. Maybe they'll be the Los Angeles Angels of last year. Not that they have so many pieces on their lineup that say now is the time. I'm just saying maybe they'll smell this and think that it's time. I think, that this next series against the Dodgers before the All-Star game is going to, probably cool them off. They'll use the All-Star game to think about it. Then they'll probably take 2 of 3 from Toronto because Toronto. And then they'll probably give up 3 of 4 to the Cleveland Guardians and then wave a white flag next time we talk. That's kind of what I think is going to happen here in the next 10 days until our next recording. And then a couple of their veteran pieces go bye-bye. Detroit doesn't seem good enough, but this week they played like they are. So if they do it again, this all can get punctured, and we can start talking like, whoops, should have picked Detroit after all. But at 45 and 49, let's look at the other teams who sit around there in the standings, and I do want to talk about that. On the American League, I've hinted that the Rays are there. I've hinted that the Astros are in the rear mirror. I should have said the Rangers are there. Are they better than the Rangers? Not to me. Are they better than the Rays? History doesn't say so. So, meh. And then you look at the National League teams. I mean, I do want to point out that the Reds were right there, locked in step record-wise with the Detroit Tigers before the Tigers swept them. So that's what makes it so impressive to me. But the Pirates are around their record. I will say the Mets are close enough to their record that I'll include them in this list. The Giants and the Diamondbacks, these are the teams we're comparing a Detroit to, and a lot of them look better on paper or have proven that they're better historically. So that's all I'll say. I don't have faith in Detroit being a playoff contender, and the next 10 days is probably going to tell them that too. But we've been wrong before. So let's see if we're wrong this week about a Detroit team. If they're risers again next week, whoops, here we go. Things are getting even more interesting in the American League Central. I feel like that's a good spot to move us into the top 3. Oh boy. And when I look at these 3 teams, I would not have said oh boy, because you're right. These are 3 teams I don't typically root for, but covering our bases has taught me to appreciate good baseball. And I suppose now will be my chance to make sure we don't talk about the Houston Astros at the end of the show. Let's talk about them now.
Good call.
They were first last week. I do not want them to do it again. Thank you, Dan. Absolutely. So I place the Astros at number 3 after a 7-3 week. Yucky. More success for the Astros, who I fire truck all the time. Different F word. You guys know that. That's my running gag. They split. No, they didn't. They won 3 of 4 games against the Toronto Blue Jays. Absolutely friendly reminder to the Blue Jays that they're not good enough yet. The Blue Jays don't listen.
Friendly reminder, you suck.
No, okay, good. I was
Thanks,
about to
Ward.
say you were. I thought you were gonna counter me with something, to say, hey, don't tread on the Blue Jays. They tread on themselves, okay?
Two out of three losses to the Minnesota Twins helped me breathe a little bit because we were going through a rough patch and I did not want Houston to get even closer. So thank you, Minnesota. I appreciate you. And then after that, the Miami Marlins served up three delicious, wins for the Astros. Something that the Mariners couldn't do when they had a chance against the Marlins. So you better believe I'm aware that the Houston Astros look hotter than we do. And I'm so scared of it. I'm grateful for every moment we get to stay one step ahead of them. But it's going to be a scary race going down the stretch, and I know this. They do get Texas as this next series before the All-Star break, and then afterwards we greet them at home as we discussed already. So go Mariners. May that be an incredibly important series that we take advantage of. And then after that, Houston will either continue positive momentum or lick their wounds against the Oakland Athletics. Another opportunity for them to get some probably easy wins over a divisional rival. So Houston, 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 Houston.
I'm not shocked, of course, that it's the pitching story that is getting stronger that ensures that their continually hot offense doesn't go to naught. They're already beating us in run differential, so it's all about trying to mitigate that hot offense, that powerful offense. Dano, go ahead as you finish your sip. Now that you've wet your whistle, warn me of the dangers of the Houston Astros one more bloody time.
Oh man, like it's not that the offense is better, it's the pitching has just been better. Like the offense has been there, we've talked about that. The slumps that they had at
Yep.
the start of the year where anytime Renel Blanco wasn't pitching, and they've just gotten more consistent. I mean, Valdez and Brown have really hammered it down. Jake Bloss is a guy who didn't have any experience, kind of settled in his last few starts. Spencer Arrighetti I've mentioned a few times since they gave him a chance, pretty high ranked prospect who's been pretty reasonable. His ERA is around 5, nothing crazy, but it's been good enough, and that's been the story. Good enough. Verlander and McCullers are still not on this team, along with Urquidy and Javier. I mean, Warren Kyle Tucker has still not been on the team for this past month, and he's going to be returning in the next few weeks, probably post All-Star break. So there's still a pathway for Houston to improve. I definitely look at this as a little bit more of the upshot of them kind of hitting the ceiling of everything going the right way. There will be more slumps to come the rest of the year in this dogfight for the division title. I understand to be worried about them, Warren. They're not done. They're not done. I feel like this next series is going to be very indicative. Like we talked about, a little bit of a playoff preview, Seattle, Houston. Is that going to set some momentum? Whoever comes out on top in that series will almost certainly be leading the division. Probably take a tiebreaker. And will they carry that the rest of the year? That's a moment that you could change the fortune of Houston, send them on a little bit of a rough patch. But Seattle's going to have to start that. I don't know, Warren.
Yep.
Think they can do it?
Well, they did when the last time you set up a series between us just that same way. It was a 4-game set in
Perfect.
Seattle. You said it the exact same way. You said, dude, go out there and win enough games to push them back, and we won 3 of 4.
There you go.
So that was a different Houston team.
Sure.
I don't know if it was a different Seattle team, and that's the problem. So very excited about the matchup. It's legitimately viscerally important for us to win 2 of 3 in that series. It could be as you and I have discussed in the past. It could be paradigm shifting for the way people look at the Mariners. So,
Yes.
holy cow, is that not the most important series of the season coming out of the All-Star break? And it's less than 10 days away. And my palms are sweaty, everybody. Look at the water
Mom
flowing out of my
spaghetti.
hands. I'm excited, guys. I'm excited because I think we have a chance, but I, of course, respect the Astros. I, of course, don't want to see them continue to pay off this storyline of chasing down those Seattle Mariners everybody expects to lose anyway. I don't want that storyline to continue. Tread on the throats of the Astros. Fire truck the Astros. Light your candles. Do your seances. Yumo boy bye bye desao. Yumo boy bye bye desao. Yumo boy bye bye desao. If you know that reference, you better put it in the comments because I love you. Okay. Houston is out of the way, and that leaves us with just 2 teams left. My final pick is Nye. So I'm gonna be candid with you, my guy.
No, it's you. You're the even Steven. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah. No.
You're gonna challenge me to talk about one of these teams left, and I kind of hope you go with the one that you know is more in my wheelhouse. Hint, hint, wink, wink. And you stick to the one that's more in your wheelhouse for the second. But whatever, you may take the chance to blow some smoke up my butt about your favorite team. So here we go, Dan. I'm done. What do you got?
Warren, you give me a choice between the AL and the NL. You know which way I'm going to go every single time. It's the New York Mets at number 2, baby. Even though
Okay.
I will say, Warren, it was a good week, but technically we had 2 series splits. We had a bunch of games this week. 7-4 the Mets went. A split with Washington in a 4-game set, and then a split with Pittsburgh in a 4-game set. So I'll be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if you knocked them down a little peg, because they did finish off the week with a sweep of Washington, but it's just Washington, and we already kind of talked about that a little bit. So yeah, happy to see the Mets up here riding a bunch of momentum. A few fun stats, Warren. Since the start of June, the Mets have the best, or I should say, the highest scoring offense in MLB. Since the start of July, just these past couple weeks, they have the number 1 ERA. They have the number 1 batting average with runners in scoring position, which is funny
Kill 'em.
because we have the 20th best batting average without runners in scoring position. But hey, man, that's when it matters, right? Starling Marte's been hurt this whole time, and we've seen the top of the order come to life. Our brand new infield of Mark Vientos at third and Jose Iglesias as second has been otherworldly, Warren. It's been game changing. Luis Torrens has been the backup catcher we've been waiting for. Like, the list goes on and on and on. The starters have been doing better. Manaya and Severino in particular, and Quintana, I would say, have all settled in. That's what we were counting on from those veterans. Maybe they started a little bit rough, but they've all settled in really well. And we kind of struggled without Senga, who every week I feel like I say, oh, he's getting close. He is actually in AAA rehabbing now, Warren. So possibly post All-Star break, we'll finally see him get back. But we've had a lot of injuries to the bullpen, which is why we made a move. The Mets traded for Phil Maton from the Rays, who pitched great in his first game against the Nats. And we've had the bullpen be a little bit better, but we'll probably still make some additions to the bullpen. With that being said, I think it's pretty clear at this point with the Mets at the top of the wild card race, not going to be sellers this year. It's possible we still move a name. Like, I don't think you're going to see like a Severino or JD Martinez like I talked about a while ago. We could still see maybe like I had 1 year like a Harrison Bader or like a Tyrone Taylor or like a more depth piece moved. I don't really see any other large moves. Also, I'll finish off on this, I suppose, and I'll give you a chance, Warren. Pete Alonso is in the All-Star game. He's in the Home Run Derby. But honestly, at the expense of Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo, who both, after some slow starts to the season, have exploded recently, especially Brandon Nimmo. And I want to say Brandon Nimmo doesn't have a Gold Glove. He doesn't have an All-Star appearance. He's played 7 years, I think his 8th year in the league. This dude deserves both of those things, but certainly an all-star with the way he's been playing the last few years, and especially this year. So Gold Glove is still on the table. It's just so tough in the National League, especially when he was center fielder for so long. That's such a tough position. But Brandon Nimmo is my snub from the Mets for the All-Star game, and honestly, he deserves it more than Pete.
Dang. Hey, how on earth can I follow that? Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I do more studying of your Mets than you do. And I love how you break down in such a three-dimensional way you're thinking about the trajectory of this club. And I just want to say, in response to it, before we talk about this week's number 1 team, it's beautiful that just a couple months ago we were talking about how you were in your own cultural hell a little bit with the controversy we were facing around that pitcher who literally, blew a tantrum off and found his way off the team. Remind me of the name. I know you got it on cue and I can't remember who it was, but we were talking like,
oh gosh,
had a poopy
I don't actually. I forgot he existed. I know what you mean though, because it was the last day of May before a closed door meeting, and it's been a whole nother team since then.
Right, I think it was another Lopez name or something like that. But
Jorge Lopez. Yeah, you got it.
Look at me, I'm learning.
Yeah, against the Dodgers.
Yep. There we go. It's all coming back to us now. But that was like a low point, and we were starting to talk like this was the National League Oakland team, and
thank goodness to see how the pieces in place are paying off and the team is rallying around one another and playing so much infinitely better. I'm happy for you because it did feel like it was going to be a long season with how many times I was getting to pick first here in
Yeah.
our
But
discussions.
that's not
So,
far away, Warren. Part of me always tries to remember that and thinks like, is this our ceiling right now? And we could go back to that. Like we could still see those offensive slumps back to those numbers. I mean, career wise, we don't see that from these guys. So what we're seeing now is a lot more expected from all these guys, but still very possible. You never know. That's what I'm worried
so
about as a
Dan,
Mets fan at every second of every day.
yeah, hey, and I think we all do that for our respective teams, whether we're as open and vulnerable about our sensitivities and our anxieties as we should be. Hey, man, mental health is important, even in covering baseball. My guy, go ahead and do it. Do it the honors. Look at the slate of the next couple series for these Mets and tell me what you think will happen after those 10 games, and then we'll bring it home with our final team of the week.
Yeah, man. So right before the All-Star break, we got 3 against Colorado in New York. So we'll see how that goes before we take a trip to Colorado next month. Then they have the All-Star break, and then we're gonna get back with 4 against Miami, divisional rival. Should be easy to get those. And then second half of the Subway Series, another 2 games against those Yankees. This time in Yankee Stadium. Went really well the first 2. With the Yankees still reeling, hopefully the Mets could finish them off and knock them down another peg off another strong week. Staying optimistic, Warren. Gotta stay
Dan,
optimistic.
I think you've got a real strong shot at a great week coming up. So let's see if the storyline continues for those Mets. You love to see it after such a rough start to the season for my co-host here. Keep up the great work, New York, the Mets, that is. And let's go barreling into the other New York Yankee rival who gets to be the number 1 team this week. I don't know if it's the first time. It feels like it is, but we've talked and talked and talked about how Milwaukee has been such an amazing breath of fresh air and a true bona fide surprise to Dan and I and the rest of the league. And in the American League, there's really only one team that really fits that same mold. But boy, if they're not even stronger than Milwaukee at this moment, I think they are. They're certainly saying they're stronger than their longtime Yankee rivals in the division. Of course, I'm talking about the Fenway Fair, the Boston Red Sox, ladies and gentlemen. Holy cow. Again, 7-2 this week, rebounding from a shaky week last week. They've been going up and down and up and down, which, like Milwaukee, signifies that they're a tough team that really believes in themselves right now. So they sweep the Miami Marlins. They take 2 of 3 from the Yankees in New York. So, like, hello. And then they get 2 of 3 from Oakland. So an easy week for these Boston Red Sox as they cruise to the top of our rankings. They're 51-41. They're 10 games over 500. They have an even better record in that way than, say, I don't know, Seattle. So this is legitimate. This is real. This is an actual playoff team at this moment. And they are definitely not interested in relinquishing it after such an impressive start to the year. Of course, we've talked about how pitching cued it off first, but the young bats on this lineup have done their part to announce that it's not just about the arms. It is about those players rallying around one another and taking positive steps in the right direction. I know you want to talk about Jaron Duran. Go ahead, Dan.
Dude.
He's got to be a big reason why this team's number 1 right now. Give it to me straight, dude. How do you feel about the Sox?
Oh man, I am still eating so much crow for my bad prediction on the Sox because I predicted that they would have a lot of injuries and they'd be in a tough division. Those things are true, but it didn't slow them down. It hasn't stopped them at all. And great point, Warren. Also, just pointing out how much torture the Yankees fans are probably going through seeing those 2 teams at 1-2. I love that.
Yeah.
But for Boston, especially being only now 3.5 games behind the Yankees, I mean, they have a real chance of surpassing them and going for the division lead. And I never would have guessed that. I really wouldn't have. I also, Warren, wouldn't have guessed that Jaron Duran, Iron Man Jaron Duran, would be in the All-Star game and one of the only players on the team, probably besides, like, actually, no, Warren, no, he has still leading the team in plate appearances and games played. He's their Iron Man.
Yep.
And he's been
Yep.
offensively leading the team in that way. Somebody else, though, gotta say, Connor Warren has been
Yeah.
unreal this year. Dude's hitting 314 right now, which is insane.
Yep.
You already talked about their rotation. I mean, let's just remind everybody that Kenley Jansen is still on this team closing it down. They just have
Right.
they have one of the best starters in Tanner Hork. They got Kenley Jansen closing out the back of their games. They got all of these pieces and David Hamilton and Devers and Tyler O'Neill. They got all of these pieces just enough to win all of these games. They're not exactly dominant, but they don't need to be.
What am I doing to my finger?
Cutting off your own finger?
Cut like Cutter Crawford, buddy. Don't forget to put some respect on Cutter Crawford's name.
Okay.
Yo, I went for it, my guy. Okay, don't make me bellow at you about Cutter Crawford.
Well,
you know, Brian bellow at you. Okay,
got it.
This team's been so good, so good. Top half of both, so many pitching stats, so many hitting stats. Right at the moment, the smoke on the water is not in effect when it comes to Boston. They really are playing like a team that's going to make the playoffs right now. So teams like Houston and Kansas City and Detroit and Toronto and Seattle, who all thought that they weren't going to be a factor, need to go, oops. We might have lost one of these 3 wildcard spots already to a team that no one had on our radar. And it's a great thing. And they've done it all without some pretty important pieces to their future. I mean, I love pointing out Tristan Casas, even though he hasn't been able to do a thing for this group this year. Imagine where they'd be if he was here, continuing to push his career in the upward trajectory that he has been. It's just great stuff to see. Lots of good stories. What if Trevor Story hadn't gone down with that shoulder injury, right? Like, there's a lot of different reasons to look at this Boston team and go, oops, we're sorry. We didn't mean to do that, but
and
we're glad you're here.
Their whole infield.
Yeah, they're playing really well. Kudos to the coaching staff. Kudos to the front office for putting this team together quietly, while all of us sat around, including the media, going, well, Boston doesn't think like Boston anymore. Dude,
so
this
wrong.
is the most right. This is the most Boston team we've seen in years.
Yeah.
So go for it. Keep showing us what you got. Keep solidifying your identity. Keep making those young pieces work together and really celebrate the starting rotation that's doing exactly what it needs to do to give you a puncher's chance in just about every game you play. It's encouraging and incredible stuff to see. And Boston will take the top spot in our rankings. List of teams. Woo! What a fun breakdown, as they always are. I hope you enjoyed how everything got laid out, ladies and gentlemen. Dan, you too. I hope you can sleep tonight. Let us know down in the comments below if at number 30, Miami will ever... should they just switch to vegetarian burgers at this point? Impossible burgers, because that's what it feels like with their home record. Yeah. Let us know in the comments below if at number 20, Kansas City is still a lock for the playoffs in your mind, as much as they truly are for Dan and I, or are you a little bit more worried and we should maybe start listening to the patterns around the league a little better? Let us know in the comments below if at number 15 you had the Toronto Blue Jays as your guardians of the middle too, or if at this point you're like me and you just wish they'd go the heck away. Are you ready for some more teams built around Guerrero and Bichette? I know I'm not. Let's keep moving down to number 10. Let us know in the comments below if you were pleasantly surprised to see the Chicago Cubs back on sturdier legs. Do you think it's sustainable? Are you like Dan and thinking there's no chance? Or are you like me and you're waiting for one more week of results to tell you the true outcome? I gotta know, because Chicago is very, very polarizing for Dan and I. Let us know in the comments below if you think Minnesota Twins are consistently overlooked, and even at number 5 this week, we continue to disrespect them. And finally, at number 1, how about everybody's disrespect of the Boston Red Sox? Let us know in the comments below if you had them ever sniffing the top spot in momentum at this stage of the season. I bet you didn't. Be honest with us. Don't lie. Don't lie. But if you want to, lie in the comments below, because we need comments. Okay, we will see you guys in 10 more days with yet another exciting breakdown of all the Major League Baseball action. I'll have
things to say about Arizona and Chicago and Detroit that I haven't been able to say yet, and Dan's going to make sure I say them. We'll find out where the trade deadline sits as we look at the fact that the 30th is coming. We'll talk a little bit about the All-Star game, especially the superlative moments and highlights, and about that really weird layout for the home run derby. Where's the stars? That's what I have to say. And put some respect on Cal Raleigh's name. Gosh darn it. I had to make it about Seattle as we get ready to say goodbye. Dan, anything for our fans before we sign off?
I hate the All-Star jerseys, and I can't wait for Pete Alonso to win his 3rd home run derby, Warren.
I guess I'll root for you because I got no horses in that race. One more big special thank you to Maya for joining our team and helping us with the social media aspect. Everybody say hi, follow her, give us a like, a share, and subscribe. Help her grow us because we don't have the confidence to do it ourselves.
She's in the
we
chat,
just have the confidence.
Lauren. Shout her out.
Is she?
Yeah.
Yeah, go Maya! Thank you guys. This was the longest you've listened to our lead up music to the end of the show, so have fun with that, listening to it for a good 2 minutes, and we'll catch you guys next time we take another trip around the bases.